couple of petitions presented, but equally conglomerated into one, and therefore we'll be looking at this. But most importantly, just looking at, the historical events when it comes to the question of presidential petitions and generally petitions at the level of the courts that would challenge, different election positions. And therefore, welcome on board. We'll be looking at this. Importantly, also just getting the aftermath of, these mini votes or mini polls that were conducted in different parts of the country. Those ones that were not so lucky to have, gone for that ballot to choose specific leaders, that is as per the IEBC's declaration or direction for these specific positions to be postponed. We're talking of the likes of the gubernatorial position of Kakamega, as well as that one of Mombasa County, and constituencies like Rongai, that is Kitui Central, Kacheliber, and also right here in Embakasi there was also a ward that was going for an election. And so we'll be looking at the events of the same, the celebrations, and the people, the general feel of what it is that they have in terms of the kind of representation that they have brought on board. Welcome on board. It's good to have you. And later on I'll be looping in Professor Macharia Munene as well as Wakili Kennedy Echesa, that is for this very important conversation. But before then, we take a look at what the papers detail this morning, and equally the stories that have been prepared by my team. And also the world wakes up to some bad news upon the demise of one of the strongest leaders in this global fraternity. We are talking about none other than Gorbachev, Mikhail, and being one of the presidents of the Soviet Union then. And we'll be looking at the events of this. They say this is upon a serious and long moment of illness. We'll be getting details of this just to unpack his instrumental contribution as to the question of democracy across the global fraternity, that is in the world of the Soviet Union, and so much more. One who steered this moment without bloodshed, in as much as he wasn't able to get to the levels where we'd say that this then in terms of animosity was addressed. And so we'll be looking at this, as we say, may his soul rest in eternal peace, and as well as we condole with the people of his country and his family and friends. Welcome on board once again. My name is Linda Alela. This is Morning Cafe, and it begins right away taking a look at the papers, the Standard newspaper and the Daily Nation. These are the papers that we have this morning, and then as well we'll be looking at what the team has prepared. Yes, in a bit we'll be having this cast on your screen, just so we get to understand some more, and also so you can view the same. The Standard newspaper this morning speaks of how ODM outfoxed UDA in Mombasa and Kakamega elections. That's a story captured on page 8. The aftermath of this and the celebrations that are ongoing upon these very counties picking their preferred leaders, those ones that are going to steer them for the next 5 years in this dispensation of devolution. And questions continue to be asked at what we need to do as a country to make devolution a success. This as captured on page 8. Why you need number plates as well, a story captured on page 20 of the Standard newspaper. Very important for those ones that have cars and those ones that envision to hold the same. You might need to get to understand the reason why there is this mode of identification once you buy that car. A story that has been captured on page 20. Yes, front page expounded on page 20 of the Standard newspaper. And sifting fact from fiction, the petition that is at the Supreme Court. We are looking forward to that moment of truth. And so this petition to challenge the presidential election has begun in earnest, with the Supreme Court expected to separate wheat from chaff to deliver their ruling on September the 5th. Yesterday was the pre-trial. And of course, a clear indication of how the case will take center stage from the levels of the hearings to that moment of judgment. And so we'll be having this for the better part of this very day, beginning from 9 a.m. We'll definitely be showcasing that live and direct right here from the Supreme Court and right here on TV 47. So make sure that you keep it right here. And before then, we'll be just trying to deliberate on what to expect. A couple of matters that have been presented, 9 issues to be determined whether technology deployed by IEBC met standards of integrity, verifiability, security, and transparency to guarantee accurate and verifiable results, as well whether there was interference with the uploading and transmission of Forms 34A from the polling station to the IEBC public portal. And also another matter that will be looked into is whether there was a difference between Form 34A that is uploaded on IEBC portal and those that were received at a National Tallying Center and those issued to agents at the polling station. Point number 4, we'll be looking at whether the postponement of governors, MPs and MCAs election in different areas led to voter suppression to the detriment of Raila and Karua. Equally, whether there were explained or unexplained discrepancies between votes cast for presidential candidates and those ones of other elective positions. And point number 6, whether IEBC carried out the verification, tallying process and declaration of results in accordance to the law. Number 7, we'll be looking, or the courts will be looking to determine whether Ruto attained 50+1 vote threshold in accordance with the law. And number 8, whether there were irregularities and illegalities enough to affect final presidential election results. And as well, the last one would be the relief and orders that Supreme Court then grant or issue. And we'll be looking at all these couple of matters that were looked into on this day one of the pre-trial, and we'll be having this all conglomerated to get to have the answers as to the 9 matters, and therefore the decision that then will place us at a point where we get to understand if we are going for a rerun, or then there will be that need for us to have, another president declared, contrary to what the IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati then declared, or better yet, we get to see whether this position will be upheld at the Supreme Court in this 9 days of battle. And again, the very same story finds itself on the front page of the Daily Nation. Kenya decides, that is 2022 or decision 2022, and a Supreme battle wins and loses. The Supreme Court gets down to business. That is from today in the Raila versus Ruto election petition, after setting the ground rules during yesterday's pre-trial conference. And the Azimio chief was given access to IEBC servers, while Ruto and Chebukati scored a win against the 4 dissenting commissioners. All eyes now turn to the lawyers and to the judges on how they are going to argue on these cases. Page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8 are the pages that look into this matter right here on the Daily Nation, and therefore we'll be looking at the same, not forgetting what played out in Kakamega County, and a good night for Right Honorable Raila Odinga in elections. The Azimio Leaders Coalition won 5 of the 6 races up for grabs on Monday, and trouncing William Ruto, the Kakamega and Mombasa governor bids, and taking 3 of the 4 Member of Parliament slots in Kitui Rural, Kacheliber and Pokot South, and also as Kenya Kwanza won in Rongai. And so we'll be looking at all this as we continue with the broadcast, the aftermath, and we get the reactions of the people. Police to hold girl in bizarre murders. And detectives in Kikuyu police station, that is in Kiambu County, have been allowed to hold about 14 days and a 15-year-old girl who admitted to killing her 3 siblings and a cousin in a graphic confession that shocked the nation. A story captured on page 10. It is a developing story, and therefore any developments that would hit the editorial desk, you can be rest assured I'll be here to make sure that you get the updates of the same. Motorists said to pay about 3,000 for new plates, and the government will rake in more than about 14.4 billion from fresh registration of about 5 million cars in the country as it rolls out a new generation number plates. From October, the rollout then will begin with newly registered vehicles from the KDK series. A story captured on the back page of the Daily Nation as well. Kenya-China in double taxation deal to spur trade and investment. That has been captured on the front page, expounded on the back page of the Daily Nation. And Kenya plans to sign an agreement with China to end double taxation of income or gains arising from one country and paid to residents from the other. And those are the key stories that are happening locally, and also as to what is in relation to Kenya and the relationship with other countries. We upset royal dynamic just by existing, well, says the Duchess of Sussex. This is on the international scene. Remember, it's been moments and moments of controversy for these two after their marriage, as they have gone against the odds or have gone against the rules of the house that in regards to the dynasty. And after announcing they would step back from their royal duties, Prince Harry and Meghan initially moved to Canada. That is in January 2020. And after Canada said it would stop providing security for the family, they moved to California. And interesting stories are happening. This very kingdom, the United Kingdom, interesting stories that one would want to follow up on, and we get to understand whether then it is that moment of change for this kingdom that has long existed. U.S. officials complete review of documents seized in Trump raid, and of course the Department of Justice in the United States has finished examination of documents seized, that is in the raid of former President Donald Trump, that is Mar-a-Lago residents in Florida. And remember, it's also been a series of battles against his reign and what really played out during the time he was elected in, and the involvements that he'd had with different countries and other leaders, and most importantly, whether they were detrimental to the existence of the United States. And therefore, following up on this, we'll be getting more updates. Somalia, United States hold security talks. Somali Defense Minister Abdikadir Mohamed Nur and they're visiting Commander of the United States Africa Command, General Michael Langley, discussed the war on terrorism. Remember, the question of Al-Shabaab and terror is one of the problems that has bedeviled the global fraternity, and the war is on. It is a global menace, and whether this then talks will bring us to a point of success is a question of wait and see. The World Health Organization director in Asia accused of racism and abuse put to leave. Kasai was put on extended administrative leave. That is after internal investigations substantiated some of the misconduct complaints that were presented as to this. Probe began after 30 identified staffers sent confidential complaint to the World Health Organization's executive board, alleging that Kasai had created a toxic atmosphere. How this will be dealt with or handled, again, is a question of wait and see. This as the United Nations seeks about 19.25 billion in emergency aid for Pakistan. It is not all rosy down there, and the Pakistan issued an appeal yesterday for about 19.2 billion, that is about $160 million in emergency funding to help millions affected in record-breaking floods that have killed about more than 1,150 people since mid of June. That is what is happening in the international scene. Anything else that would be here, I'll definitely make sure that I keep you up to tabs also as we get more updates on the developing story of the demise of Mikhail Gorbachev, who died in Moscow. That is early this morning. Away from it, let's now pick some of these stories prepared by my team. And the United Nations, in collaboration with Kenya government, has opened the service center which aimed to provide good governance reign required by the Union and the United Nations agencies, enabling them to acquire their mandate. And speaking at Gigiri in Nairobi during the meeting, Foreign Affairs CS Rachel Umamo said the United Nations office has gained great impact across the country, mentioning the COVID-19 pandemic which dragged Kenyan activities and economy down, particularly in Nairobi, by putting up humanitarian agencies which enabled everyone to navigate out of the pandemic. Interior Cabinet Secretary Dr. Fred Matiang'i also assured their support of a smooth working environment.
Services required by UNON and other UN agencies to enable them achieve their mandate. I think we're all aware about the importance of this office, who was able to explain to us in some detail what we were dealing with. And we were absolutely flabbergasted. So in order to deal with the COVID-19 challenge, we set up a temporary multi-agency committee to try and keep humanitarian agencies supported and to help everyone navigate through that crisis.
From now henceforth, I don't think we should have a situation where staffers of the UN have got to go to the immigration office in town to sort out their problems, or any of the UN staffers have got to go to NTSA to sort out any issues related to their motor vehicles. We have had internal arrangements on how we are going to measure performance and delivery of the services we'll give to you, and we have all agreed that every service required here will be offered within a 12-hour cycle, and nothing should go beyond 12 hours. Because for the officers we are seconding here, there is nothing they are coming here except to serve the staff of the UN.
And the government has launched a new generation of digital number plates with inbuilt security features that allow for tracing of cars' ownership by law enforcement agencies. And the plates that comply with the amended Traffic Act of 2016 will bear additional features, some of which shall be visible physically and others only to security agencies for ease of tracing in the event that they are involved in committing crime.
The new generation number plates for motor vehicles unveiled by Interior CS Fred Matiang'i are set to serve as part of the measures to guarantee security against duplication. Speaking during the launch at GSU Reke Unit Headquarters in Juja, Kiambu County, where the plates are being produced, Interior CS Fred Matiang'i said the plates shall be fixed to vehicles imported to the country at the point of entry and will be synchronized with KRA systems to help read cases of tax evasion in car-selling businesses.
We're doing this because we want to increase the security of our country. That's why we said this project essentially is a process of securitizing motor vehicle registration as a way of addressing the security challenges we've had in the country, and as a way of ensuring that we are able to clean up our society as much as we can of wrongdoers and people whose intentions may not be good for our country. Secondly, we are doing this because we want to help other agencies in government, like the Kenya Revenue Authority, and the others to function effectively.
Transport CS James Masharia, on the other hand, said the new plate will cover 12 categories of vehicles in line with the Legal Notice 62 of 2016 and allow ease of monitoring vehicles coming into the country that ranks as a major transit hub in the region.
We launched, or rather we gazetted, what we call Legal Notice 62, number 62, in 2016. That legal notice was basically to say we are going to have new traffic number plates rules, which will cover about 12 categories of vehicles. And so today really is a very big milestone that what seemed a dream then has become a reality.
He further noted that vehicles in the country have risen significantly from 3.2 million last year to 4.8 million this year, hence the need to devise an easier way to track and monitor them.
2 years ago, Chair, the number of vehicles in this country were only about 3.2 million. Vehicles meaning, four-wheel, two wheels, 3.2 million. Today is 4.8. And so, if you want to monitor the movement of vehicles within and across the borders, what you are doing today is actually very historic.
Kenyans will be required to acquire the new digital number plate at a cost of 3,000 shillings within the next 18 months, after which the government will begin a crackdown on non-compliant motorists.
We would take about a year or less than a year. The capability we have acquired here, we could actually do all the number plates and change all of them within 12 months. But because Kenyans do not like being harassed or hassled or pushed around, let's now agree that we should be able to complete the exercise inside the next 18 months.
Also present at the launch event was NTSA Director General George Njau, Commissioner General of Prisons John Warioba, Interior Principal Secretary Karanja Kibicho, among other senior government officials. Reporting for TV47, my name is Beatrice Watare.
2022 general elections suffered a big blow to the Moi name politically. Gideon Moi losing the senatorial seat and his elder brother being defeated in Rongai parliamentary seat race. And as our very own Moige William interrogates the future of the once powerful political name, he also looks into the future of the country's independence party, KANU.
Taking after their late father, the second head of state, Daniel Arap Moi, Mzee's last-born son, Gideon Moi, together with his elder brother, got into the murky world of politics. Gideon Moi was the first among the Mois to dare be like their father, taking up the parliamentary seat of Baringo Central, a constituency the late President Moi served for 39 years. Getting it easy by the fact that his father was president, Gideon easily captured the Baringo Central MP, serving from 2003 up to 2013, before being elected as the first senator of Baringo County and later making a move for the country's top seat before dropping his bid and supported Raila Odinga. His fall, quick as he had risen, befell him in his third quest to be a senator, with the William Ruto-led UDA wave sweeping Rift Valley.
Fire begets ash. Moi was a tough man. His children are not tough. Look at another one has just lost in Rongai. I know there was an onslaught on him. But if my father is the president of Kenya, you cannot remove me from a small constituency. You cannot. How? I told you, how can Uhuru be defeated in his own Ishaweri village? You know, these oligarchs, they all behave in the same manner. They rarely get in touch with the people. And that's why William Ruto finds it very easy to deal with them.
Gideon's defeat in the recently concluded general election is seen as a win for President-elect William Ruto, who for some time has been embroiled in a supremacy battle with the Mois on who will lead the Rift Valley region.
And I can sympathize with Gideon because him more than anybody else will be Ruto's target. Because Ruto must have complete control of the Rift Valley. He already has, but just to make sure nobody else can come from the sides and confuse people. Because now you see, when you are drowning, then you may now wake up from class and decide you want to be a little more active. And you could end up confusing a few people.
The Moi family, which is a big business family in this country, what it means to the family, which runs a litany of business companies in this country with huge business interests, not just in Kenya but across the region, is that they would be doing their business and doing their politics from behind the scenes. They will not be taking the front platform on matters of politics.
With the postponement of the parliamentary election in Rongai constituency, the mini polls served as the final nail in the wearing off of the Moi name in the political spectrum, as Raymond Moi, even before the polls, lamented about the heavy machinery deployed by the Ruto-led UDA to campaign against him, eventually losing the MP seat. Raymond served the area from 2013.
I think Raymond Moi was a victim of the strong UDA Kenya Kwanza wave, as opposed to those who thought that he had performed in the last 10 years and should be retained.
Is this a writing on the wall? Is it the end of the Mois in as far as politics is concerned?
You know, politics is an interesting game. You could think somebody is finished, but they could resurface. But on the face of it, when you just look at what's going, I think the Mois are finished. This could mark the end of the Mois, and I would advise them for free. For free. I used to call Gideon Moi a prince in waiting, and I always assumed the reason why Uhuru was supporting Raila was so that Raila may be a caretaker president the way Kibaki was, as Uhuru was being processed to become president. I would think Gideon will come after Raila Odinga, but he has done nothing to show that would be the case. So this is the end of the Mois.
The KANU party, which has been under the leadership of Gideon Moi, has not been spared, with its popularity dwindling over the years. The chama cha Baba na Mama has over the years been on a downward spiral, with political pundits alluding this to the leadership offered by its current chairperson, who is Gideon.
For the first years after Moi left, the name KANU was synonymous with all the problems Kenya has had. But I think that has since disappeared. In Malawi, the equivalent of KANU came back to power. So there's nothing really in terms of memories that stand in the way of KANU and greatness. So if KANU had leadership, it will just be great.
Going forward, in the next few days, we may see a situation where KANU, which is led by Gideon Moi, the former senator of Baringo County, approaching whichever party is going to take over the presidency.
Interestingly, Gideon Moi and his bitter political rival from the region, William Ruto, learned politics from the same teacher, the late president, who also referred to himself as the professor of politics. And as Ruto leads a successful political career, the same can hardly be said of Gideon.
So he must have known that once his brother William takes over, it will be very difficult for him to sustain himself in politics and in business, especially business.
Gideon Moi lost the senatorial seat to former Baringo North MP William Cheptumo, who vied on the UDA ticket, with Raymond Moi losing the Rongai parliamentary seat to Paul Chebor, also of UDA. Moige William, TV 47.
It was a contest between Deputy President Ruto's Kenya Kwanza and Azimio la Umoja in the Kacheliba, Rongai, Kitui Rural and South Pokot parliamentary races, while UDA won the Rongai seat. And of course, former Governor Professor John Lonyangapuo dominated in West Pokot's Kacheliba and South Pokot, while Wiper retained Kitui Rural constituency, as Paul Muniu reports.
In Kitui Rural Parliamentary Race, Wiper Party's David Mwalika was declared the winner in the just concluded mini poll held on Monday. Mwalika garnered 19,735 of the total votes, defeating his competitor Charles Nyamai of UDA, who garnered 10,178 votes. It was a two-horse race in the constituency. In Rongai constituency, Nakuru County Paul Chebor of UDA party has been duly elected as the member of National Assembly after defeating his two counterparts, including the incumbent member of parliament Raymond Moi of KANU and Luka Kigen of Chama cha Mashinani. Paul Chebor secured the win with 27,021 of total votes cast. In Kacheliba constituency, West Pokot County Titus Lote of Kenya Union Party will represent the constituency in the National Assembly after emerging the winner with 20,073 total votes cast in the race that had attracted the incumbent Member of Parliament Mark Lomuno Cole, who garnered 17,963, and John Lokitare, who finished third with 1,446 votes.
Nataka kuhakikishia wakacheliba wote kwamba mimi nitafanya yote ambayo nilisema nitayafanya.
In South Pokot, out of 46,200 votes cast yesterday, 28,225 were cast in favor of David Kosin of Kenya Union Party, retaining his seat.
In the history of Pokot, this is a landslide win. A landslide win.
As he defeated Simon Kalekem of UDA, who got 15,298. Other mini polls were held in Nyaki Ward in Meru County, where Frederick Mubichi of UDA emerged the winner, and Kwanjenga Ward in Embakasi, where independent candidate Kirango Kimondo emerged the winner, garnering 2,098 votes. Paul Muniu, TV 47.
And barely a week after being sworn into office, first-time governors and their re-elected counterparts alike have already begun making changes in their various administration ahead of the 5-year tenure. In Migori County, Governor Ochilo Ayako has put lazy county workers on notice as Turkana Governor Jeremiah Lumakurai made changes to the county executive team. Zainab Mohammed details.
Migori County Governor Ochilo Ayako has urged rioting county workers to return to work and serve the people of Migori, vowing not to spare lazy workers in his administration. The second governor of Migori also promised to only pay verifiable bills, vowing to fight graft.
From the reports that I've received, we have quite a sizable chunk of pending bills that we need to verify and pay if they are payable. We also have challenges in staff establishment.
In Nyandarua County, Governor Dr. Kiarie Badilisha made an impromptu visit to the J.M. Kariuki Referral Hospital, observing that the health sector is a critical agenda in his administration. The governor has promised to set up a satellite office at the hospital in order to follow closely the challenges affecting the hospital.
Hospitali hii ndio tegemeo ya watu wa eneo hii. Na tumekuwa tukisikia mambo mengi kuhusu services hapa, ndio tukakuja kujionea. Kitu cha kufurahisha ni kwamba naona kuna madaktari wale youthful doctors na wanafanya kazi mzuri.
Re-elected Kisumu Governor Professor Anyang' Nyong'o hosted U.S. Ambassador Margaret Whitman in a diplomatic visit aimed at reviving humanitarian-funded projects undertaken by the Center for Disease Control. The ambassador assured the governor that the advisory alert issued by the U.S. during elections was not targeting Kisumu County only, but areas where its citizens are residing, Kisumu being one of them.
Been working many years together in Kisumu on PEPFAR, HIV/AIDS, malaria, all kinds of different tropical diseases. And that work continues. In fact, we are, the funding actually has not been reduced. Certainly it has not been reduced in Africa broadly, and I don't believe it's been reduced here in Kenya.
And in Kitui County, Governor Dr. Julius Malombe led county staff, cabinet members, representative of the business community, youth and persons with disability in an interdenominational prayer session at the governor's office complex in Kitui town. The prayers were led by Kitui Catholic Diocese Bishop Joseph Mwongela in conjunction with a host of clergymen from other denominations across the county. Finally, Turkana Governor Jeremiah Lomorukai has made changes to the county executives, stating the need to improve service delivery for the benefit of the people of Turkana County. Among the changes made include the appointment of new officers and the reshuffling of others.
Captain retired Augustine Lokwanga Kitela retained in the office of the county governor. Mrs. Esther Ikaru retained in the Ministry of Public Service, Administration and Disaster Management. Ms. Stella Lochodo, currently County Chief Officer for Tourism, Culture, Environment and Energy and Natural Resources, transferred to Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning.
Zainab Mohammed, T47.
And Kakamega County was painted blue as ODM's candidate Fernandez Baraza bagged the gubernatorial seat, trouncing the incumbent Kakamega Senator Cleopas Malala. And as Baraza flew the flag high, he is still hopeful that the Supreme Court will rule in Azimio's favor and declare the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga as president-elect.
The much-awaited neck-to-neck race to replace Kakamega's outgoing governor Wycliffe Oparanya revealed that Kakamega County is a battleground for both Azimio and Kenya Kwanza alliances. These as Fernandez Baraza garnered 192,929 votes, followed closely by ANC's Cleopas Malala, who got 159,508 votes, showcasing a difference of at least 33,000 votes.
I want to appreciate watu wa Kakamega for not disappointing our party leader, kwa sababu Kakamega ni ngome ya Azimio.
Even as the hotly contested race was postponed by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission twice, the outgoing governor did not take the move lightly, terming it as a plot for voter apathy in the region in the August 9th polls.
That this election was postponed by IBC in order to make sure that Kakamega people do not come out in large numbers to vote for Raila Odinga. And we knew that they wanted this seat to go to Kenya Kwanza. But through your efforts and our efforts, the seat has remained where it belonged, Azimio.
Shortly after IEBC announced the gubernatorial results for the race, Malala conceded defeat, promising to support the incoming governor, dusting his feet and promising to be back and try his luck again in the next general election.
Kubali matokeo sababu katiba yetu inatuambia kwamba uchaguzi utafanywa kila miaka 5 na kutakuwa na mshindi na yule ambaye ameshindwa. So sisi tumekubali matokeo na tumekubali kama vichwa vyetu viko juu kabisa.
Even as the apex court is yet to determine the presidential petition, Baraza was quite hopeful that it will rule in Azimio's favor and declare Raila as the president-elect after the August 9th polls.
We are looking forward on the 5th of September to have a duly elected President of the Republic of Kenya, whom I believe the Supreme Court will announce Raila Amolo Odinga.
Muthoni Maina, TV47.
And in the same breath, Mvita Member of Parliament Abdul Somad Sharif Nasir is the new Mombasa governor-elect. Nasir won the gubernatorial race after garnering about 119,083 votes, followed by his UDA main rival Hassan Omar Sarai, who garnered about 98,108 votes. And Nasir has promised to unite residents of Mombasa as well as spearhead the county's economic growth. And Rinkili with that.
The hotly contested Mombasa gubernatorial race has seen ODM's candidate Abdul Somad Sharif emerge the winner. The Mvita Member of Parliament was announced Mombasa's governor-elect after garnering 119,083 votes, trouncing his UDA counterpart Hassan Omar Sarai with over 20,000 votes.
Mimi kama Abdul Somad Sharif Nasir ni wa kwanza kunyosha mkono kuambia ya kuwa hata baada ya matusi yote niko tayari kufanya kazi na yoyote Mombasa tupeleke mbele. Tumewashinda tujawashinda. Tumewawai tujawawai. Tumewatia maji tujawatia maji. Hamjatuaibisha, mmetusaidia sana. Na mimi kama mwenyekiti wa chama cha ODM ninasema asante sana. Watu wa Mombasa wanataka mabadiliko. Na mimi nina hakika kwa wewe utaleta haya mabadiliko.
The Mombasa gubernatorial race had attracted a total of 7 contestants, including Hezron Awiti of Vibrant Democratic Party, who garnered 875 votes, William Kingi of the Pamoja African Alliance with 712 votes, Upia's Shafi Makazi with 633 votes, Daniel Kitao, who went for the county's top seat on an independent ticket with 402 votes, and Said Abdallah of Usawa kwa Wote Party, who garnered 338 votes.
Tunafurahia maana tunajua sisi kama vijana kuna opportunity za kazi hapa, kuna matumaini tunaenda kupata, na wagombea wengine ambao wameshindwa tunawaambia wajiunge, tufanye kazi kwa pamoja na tudumishe amani.
Mungu ambariki, afanye kazi yake vile alivyoahidi, yale manifesto yake yote atimize.
Mnajua hizi takataka ambazo ziko hapa Mombasa, najua anaweza. Na Sharif Nasir pia anapenda mambo na masomo. Najua vijana wa Mombasa watasoma, na mimi nafurahia kuchagua gavana wangu Sharif Nasir.
While addressing residents in Mombasa County, Abdul Somad Sharif, who was accompanied by other Azimio One Kenya leaders, expressed his optimism regarding the presidential petition case, saying that victory would be given to the Azimio One Kenya.
Mujitayarishe, manake mimi na hakika baada ya siku 65 kutakuwa election ya pili, na mara hii tunapeleka Raila wapi?
We believe ushindi utakuwa wa ODM Azimio. Na Raila Amolo Odinga
atapewa victory na kiti yake. Na hivi karibuni judgment ya Supreme Court itatoka na itatoka iseme ni Raila Amolo Odinga.
The 7-judge bench led by Chief Justice Martha Koome will Wednesday commence a full trial of the petition. Andrina Kilemi, TV 47.
Well, congratulations to the governors-elect, and as Andrin Kelimi would say, the Chief Justice Martha Koome began the pre-trial of the hearing of the presidential petition by giving out a set of guidelines that would lock out a number of people from the court. Martha says they had to restrict the number of people inside the court owing to limited space and for security purposes.
The pre-trial of the presidential petition took place Tuesday, but first a set of guidelines that are to be adhered to during the proceedings were read by Chief Justice Martha Koome.
Yes, for the 8 petitions.
From the directions, only a chosen few will be expected inside the court, and this is mainly due to space constraints. Each side will be allowed 4 lawyers who will be present inside the court during the hearing of the petition.
Unfortunately, due to constrained space that we are operating from, we could not accommodate very many people. You can all see we are all required to observe the COVID-19 protocols. We also have to be mindful of security and the constrained time, and therefore we were forced to limit the number of the counsel who can appear at any given time, but parties are free and at liberty to have as many counsel as they could. We'll try to accommodate as many as we can in the speed of a room, court number 1, where they can follow the proceedings and continue assisting counsel who are in the plenary.
The Kenya Kwanza coalition has a team of 54 lawyers and at least 5 technical members to battle the election petitions. Azimio la Umoja One Kenya, on the other hand, will be represented by a battery of 38 lawyers.
We thank the media also for coming to stream the proceedings online to assist Kenyans and all people from all over the world who are watching and following these proceedings across Africa and across the world.
We should be in these proceedings.
Senior counsels James Orengo, Feroz Neroji, Philip Morgor and Okongo Omogeni will be the lead counsels in the Supreme Court petition filed by Raila against President-elect William Ruto.
Here together with my learned friend Professor Kindiki.
Ruto's legal team will be led by Senior Counsel Fred Ngatia, Kioko Kilukumi and Professor Kithure Kindiki. The IEBC, which has 7 commissioners who have individually filed submissions and affidavits, will only be presented by 1 legal counsel during the hearing of the petition. The rest of the petitions challenging the validity of the presidential outcome and pushing for the nullification of the results will be presented by 2 lawyers each in the presidential petition. Each of the amicus curiae, including the LSK Senior Bar Counsel, Attorney General, ICJ Kenya, John Walubengo, Joseph Sevilla, and Martin Mirero, will be represented by an attorney. All the 7 judges will be present for the hearing and determination of the petitions. This is unlike in 2017, where a 6-judge bench heard and determined the petition after Justice Ibrahim Mohammed opted out due to health challenges.
If there is time that is unspent by the council,
Kenyans have been advised to follow the proceedings through the media. Sharon Baranga, TV 47.
For the court to share it out.
And yes, you can be rest assured that we'll be having that streaming live here on TV 47. And it was a big blow for President-elect William Ruto after 2 of his petitions were struck out by the Supreme Court. In the petitions, Ruto wanted the court to add more time for their pleadings, and the 4 dissenting IEBC officers barred from the presidential petition, citing that they are second-tier petitioners and may affect the outcome of the final ruling. The court, which has also barred IEBC's request for additional time, has reiterated that the 2 presidential teams shall be given a maximum of 3 hours to present their pleadings. Cheptobo 8 with that.
Madam Chief Justice.
The Supreme Court has declined a request by lawyers in the petition challenging President-elect William Ruto's team to be allocated more time for their pleadings. The 7-judge bench, led by Chief Justice Martha Koome, has reiterated that the court will not grant additional time due to time constraints. The ruling comes after President-elect William Ruto's team and IEBC's Commissioner Abdi Guliye asked the court for more time to table their arguments, but the court has given a maximum of 3 hours.
The request for additional time by counsel for the 1st, 2nd, and the 9th respondents over and above the time allocated and issued earlier this morning is hereby declined.
It's a big win for IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati's faction after the Supreme Court has settled on former Attorney General Professor Githu Muigai to represent the IEBC in the petition. The Apex Court made the ruling after Professor Githu Muigai and Senior Counsel Paul Muite, who represents IEBC Deputy Chairperson Juliana Cherera's faction, argued during the morning session that they are going to represent the commission. Initially, the court had asked electoral agencies who are in commission to resolve their internal wrangles outside the court before settling on Professor Githu Muigai.
The notice of appointment filed by ISA and company advocates is struck out. The 4 commissioners are at liberty to deploy and utilize the services of Senior Counsel Paul Muite and Isa Mansour advocate if they deem it necessary.
There was another blow to President-elect William Ruto after the court barred his prayer of locking out IEBC commissioners from the presidential petition. Ruto wanted affidavits filed by the 4 dissenting IEBC commissioners struck out from the Azimio la Umoja petition, citing that they are second-tier petitioners and may affect the outcome of the ruling.
Learned counsel for the 1st respondent, the Honorable William Samoei Ruto, has informally applied for leave to respond to 2 affidavits presented by the Attorney General in petition number E007 of 2022. With effect from today, the 30th day of August 2022, 2 p.m., as indicated in paragraph 3 above, the court will not entertain any further lodgement of pleadings.
Cheptobo 8 TV 47, Nairobi.
Now, the President-elect William Ruto's victory will be put to test when the country's Apex Court commences hearings of a petition filed by Azimio presidential candidate Raila Odinga. The Apex Court, which held a pre-trial conference Tuesday, cited 9 key issues, among them whether or not Ruto attained the 50+1 constitutional threshold, which will guide it in making its decision on whether to annul or uphold his victory. And as TV47's Apollo Kamau reports, the electoral body, IEBC, is on the spot, with the court granting Odinga access to IEBC servers and ballot papers for scrutiny.
In what will be a make-or-break moment for President-elect William Ruto, the 7-judge bench flagged 9 key issues which will assist the country's Apex Court rule whether to uphold or annul Ruto's August 9 victory. With IEBC squarely on the spot on how it conducted the election, the question of whether or not President-elect William Ruto attained the 50+1 vote of all the votes cast will be considered by the court. Whether or not there were irregularities and illegalities of such magnitude as to affect the final result of the presidential election, whether or not there was interference with the uploading and transmission of Forms 34A from the polling stations to the IEBC public portal, whether or not there was a difference between Forms 34A uploaded on the IEBC public portal and the Forms 34A received at the National Tallying Center and Forms 34A issued to the agents at the polling stations, whether or not the postponement of gubernatorial elections in Kakamega and Mombasa counties, parliamentary elections in 4 constituencies, and electoral wards resulted in voter suppression to the detriment of Azimio presidential candidate Raila Odinga, whether or not the technology deployed by the IEBC in the conduct of the election met the standards of integrity, verifiability, security, and transparency to guarantee accurate and verifiable results, whether or not IEBC carried out the verification, tallying, and declaration of results in accordance with the Constitution, reliefs and orders to be granted by the court. Ahead of the main hearing, the Supreme Court granted Odinga and 6 other petitioners supervised access to servers storing the forensic image of Form 34C, which includes the total votes cast as presented at the National Tallying Center Bomas of Kenya and ballot boxes for 15 polling stations for scrutiny and recount. IEBC was also ordered to surrender information on system users, tallying and transmission of results software. Apul Kamau, TV47. Starting Wednesday, the conduct of IEBC in managing the August 9 presidential election will be the subject of a legal contest in court, giving the 7-judge bench a case whether to annul or uphold President-elect William Ruto's victory. Apul Kamau, TV47 at the Milimani Law Courts.
Well, the last 3 stories, and as well as the one that I'm just about to take, will be forming the basis of our conversation this morning. Yes, it's the Supreme Court that has ordered the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, to allow Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition open 15 ballot boxes in contention for inspection, scrutiny, and recount. The exercise, under strict supervision, will be conducted within 48 hours, where 2 agents from Azimio and Kenya Kwanza will be present. Stanley Nyangirita reports.
The request by DP Ruto to bar the Law Society of Kenya, LSK, from being enjoined in the 2022 presidential election petition was quashed. This follows a ruling by the Supreme Court that the society had been admitted as amicus curiae and will not make oral submissions and shall rely solely on its written brief. The list of the friends of the court will also see Dr. Joseph Sevilla, Martin Mirero, and John Walubengo, after the Apex Court allowed the application seeking leave to be joined in the petition as amici curiae. The application by the Attorney General seeking leave to admit the replying affidavits of Dr. Joseph K. Kinyua and Dr. Kennedy was also admitted. The court ruled that the allegations made by Wafula Chebukati, Abdi Gulie and Boya Molu are contained in the affidavits and it will be fair to file them. Also allowed was the application to admit on record the replying affidavits of the 4 dissenting IEBC commissioners, Juliana Cherera, Justus Nyang'aya, Francis Wanderi and Irene Samit, who disowned the results of the presidential election. The Supreme Court ordered the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, to let Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition open 15 ballot boxes in contention for inspection, scrutiny and recount. The Apex Court ordered that the exercise be conducted within the next 48 hours in the presence of 2 agents from both the Kenya Kwanza and Azimio la Umoja.
Server, Mr. Kilukumi, I think I don't have the orders here, but the last order allowed 2 agents from every interested party to appear at the centers, whether it is at Forodha House or at IBC, and that resolves Mr. Katwa Kigen's question on venue. I think from the orders, you can only have 2 venues, one at IEBC and one at Forodha House, where the Section 12 documents are at.
Each party shall be represented by 2 agents during the exercises, and they shall at times be under the supervision of the Registrar of the Court and her staff. The said stations are Nandi Hills, Sinendeti Primary School in Nandi, Belgut, Kapsuser and Chepkutum Primary Schools in Kericho County. Jomvu, Mikindani, and Ministry of Water Tanks polling stations in Mombasa County. Others are Mvita, Majengo, and Mvita Primary Schools in Mombasa County, Tinderet Konmo in Nandi County, Jarok, Gadhanji, and Kiheo Primary School polling in Nyandarua County.
Contested polling stations, I think that's resolved. You will give the list to the registrar and to the applicants and to the IEBC by close of business today. On pair number 7, that is a typo. The reference is to forms 32As and 34As.
Further, the court ordered IEBC to avail the full KPMG report on the register of voters, a full audit report on the technology used, and the report of the vendor, due diligence and technology used in the general election on the 9th of August 2022. However, the Apex Court struck out the petition from former Gatundu South MP Moses Kuria and former Mbeere South MP Geoffrey Kingangi, allies of Dr. Ruto, who had filed a petition urging the Apex Court to throw out Raila Odinga's suit on the grounds that he was involved in the election malpractices. The 7-judge bench also rejected the application by Agano Party leader and presidential candidate David Mwaure to be enjoined in the case. The petition by presidential candidate Raila Odinga, among 8 others, is seeking to challenge the results of the August 9th polls that saw Deputy President William Ruto declared president-elect with 50.49% of the votes cast. Stanley Nyaringita, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you, Stanley, for closing it for us on the question of the ruling or the hearing that begins officially today at the Supreme Court. And it is exactly 4 minutes past the top of the hour, 7 a.m. East African time. We now take a quick break and we'll be coming back with the gentlemen that help us decipher on these matters after this break.
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent, I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
Well, do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates, Baraza la Siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions, business, farming, Tasty Wednesday, Fitness Thursday, and Feel Good Friday with amazing DJs, celebs,
waimbaji, kuna comedians, alafu kuna wajinga,
and music bands every Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. The next set of millionaires are farmers. As we know, agriculture has been and still is the backbone of our economy. As we traverse the different counties to meet different farmers, we ensure to get the story of how they started farming and even how they continue to penetrate the market and overcome the challenges.
Hapa, the reason why nilieka goose na si ducks. Goose, they are very easy to maintain.
A lot of farmers keep on calling, inquiring whether you're supposed to raise some seeds in the nursery or you're supposed to do them directly in the field.
The greenhouse helps us control the temperature because the temperature needs to be between 28 to 32 degrees.
Region in training, research and communities.
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent, I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
How well do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la Siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative.
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent, I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
How well do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la Siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussion continues to position itself by
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent, I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
How well do you know what's happening around you? Every weekend from
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent, I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
How well do you
look at how the lawyers are going to deliberate and present their cases representing different quarters. And these 9 petitions that some of them quashed, others conglomerated into one. We'll be having Wakili Kennedy Echesa help us unpack this, as well as Professor Macharia Munene, who is a political historian, joining us shortly after we get to look at the key nitty-gritty details as to the legal aspect, and then later on to get to understand the significance of such legal battles and showdowns in the growth of democracy in the country. Importantly, we do not fail to look at the events of Monday and coming to yesterday, that is in the respective areas that we saw residents go for mini polls, or citizens go for these polls that were slated after that postponement twice, the 9th of August and the 23rd, and now they went to the polls on the 29th, Kakamega County, Mombasa County, as well as Kacheliba constituency, Rongai in Nakuru, and not forgetting South Pokot and also Kitui Rural. These ones went for that, election to get their leaders, as well as somewhere in Embakasi, we had a member of county assembly being elected, and out of the 6 Azimio, lucky enough to have garnered 5 and 1, UDA to run with. That is the Rongai seat, and this brings to the fore the question of what is left of the Maui political dynasty and so much more. So make sure that you're part and parcel of this conversation. Hashtag is Morning Cafe at Linda_Lela at TV47KE across all our social media platforms, as well another hashtag Kenya Decides. It's always an honor hearing from you. And Wakili Kennedy Echesa, Wakili, allow us to start because you see we cannot wait for the other gentlemen to find their way here. Once they get here, then we are lucky enough to loop them in. But we go straight to the conversation. We have the papers this morning. We have so much that is being captured on the papers, but more or less the same, what it is that we have picked to discuss, the Supreme Court showdown. And I'm glad that we begin with you, being the lawyer of the day. In terms of the guests that I had invited, I think it is fair then that we go straight to it. Later on, when Professor Macharia Munene finds his way here, then perhaps we'll look at what played out in Kakamega County, the Moi dynasty, because he's huge on the question of history, and as well as just get to understand the significance of this Supreme Court battle historically. But by and large, the pre-trial.
The pre-trial went well. Of course, we had wins and losses. Petitioners and respondents won and lost at the pre-trial stage. But the framing of the issues will then tell you, in essence, the direction that the matter is likely to take. Okay. The Supreme Court has been very generous, framing 8 issues for determination. And by practice 9. Of 9 is actually the 9th one, the orders, the relief
the orders that really, so
yes, substantively there are 8 issues. And if the judges, if 4 judges agree on any one of the 8 issues, then the petition is as good as won.
Okay.
Because the issues are framed in such a manner that if any question is answered in the affirmative, then it means that the presidential petition is allowed and the election of William Ruto is nullified.
Yeah.
So this places the burden on the respondents to ensure that all the issues are framed are answered in the negative.
All right. Well, let's talk quorum first of all, and I think we'll take it step by step so that Kenyans are privy to what to expect today. In terms of the numbers, we have a 7 bench judge or 7 judge bench here. Yes, that is to determine on this, and they say of every other petitioner, respondent and all, they'll allow about 4 lawyers for purposes of making sure that there's that sanity, most importantly the question of social distance that was cited, as well as just to have it proper in terms of addressing this. Good enough for those ones that would want to have their cases presented, looking at the numerous numbers of legal minds that are representing this respondents as well as the petitioners. We're talking of Right Honorable Raila Odinga having about 42. We're talking of Deputy President William Ruto. Much as 2-3 of his matters were quashed as of yesterday in terms of what he had pleaded to the court. About 52 lawyers or thereabout, and IEBC with numerous numbers of lawyers. But then again, only 4 would be allowed in.
I think every court by law in this country is allowed to make its own rules of practice and procedure. And the Supreme Court has its own rules. And the judges, when they convene for a court session, they also make their own rules. So allowing for counsel for every petitioner or respondent is quite in order. Alternatively, what they would have done is to give them the 3 hours to the petitioners and tell them, you may have 100 lawyers, but use 3 hours.
Okay.
That would allow the petitioners or the respondents or even the amicus to tap on their legal experts and their gifts. You know, lawyers are gifted differently. We have lawyers who are just gifted in drafting, lawyers who are gifted in research, and lawyers who are gifted in presentation. So every team will reach out to their very best minds in terms of presentation. So when you hear that a team has 42 lawyers like Azimio, it means perhaps 12 out of the 42 are just researchers, to research on the legal issues that will be argued in court. About 10 are just to make the presentations, and about 4 or 3, the best orators, the best in practice, will make the presentations to court.
So it is in order to have as many as possible, because I mean Kenyans then would be asking, just why do we have all these, you know, legal minds that have been contracted to do this, legal firms that have been contracted to
do this? You'll get to know that lawyers who are being paid out of the pool of 42 and 53 are just about 3 or 4 lawyers. The rest are volunteers. When you come to Azimio, people like Tom Ojenda, people like Otiende Amolo, people like Julie Soweto are people who are volunteered to do legal practice for Raila Odinga over years. And they do it out of their own conviction in what Raila believes in. On the other side, people like Sholei, people like Soipan Tuya, these are allies of the President-elect William Ruto and will be giving free services. But Kenyans must understand that court or litigation is not in the courtroom. Even as we speak now, before 9 a.m., these lawyers are in the boardrooms doing their own conferencing, doing their own rehearsals. And in the room of 40, they are arguing and agreeing on the most important issues. Remember, we had tons of evidence being taken to the Supreme Court by Azimio. And you require very many people, lawyers on the respondent side, to sieve through these tons of evidence and identify what is relevant and how they can respond. So if you have fewer lawyers, then you are disadvantaged. The number of lawyers should not worry Kenyans. Lawyers are working at different stages.
Why it worries us is a matter as well that was presented during the pre-trial stage yesterday as to the representation of the IEBC, the dissenting commissioners, as well as Chebukati's side, as well as the commission itself conglomerated, and questions were of course presented as pertaining to the same, perhaps because then we understand that that's then the taxpayers' money outrightly. What does it showcase in terms of the representation? And as the courts would rightfully say, it is in order for the other dissenting commissioners to be represented across by the minds that they present, including Paul Mwite.
Now, the court first made a very serious statement that it will not be involved on internal wars affecting IEBC. The choice of advocate to represent the commission entirely lies on the commission and the commissioners. And it is the CEO of the commission who gets instructions and gives to the advocate to make a memorandum of appearance. And we saw the Supreme Court strike out the appointment of the firm of Issa Mansour because the 4 commissioners had retained the services of Issa Mansour. And the court told them, now that the CEO and the chairman have already appointed someone on record for the commission, be at liberty, because you are respondents, be at liberty to hire lawyers of your choice. Whether it is the commission that will pay or you will incur the cost is now beyond us, and that one will be solved internally by the commission. This one speaks to the deep divisions within the IEBC, which divisions will also lead or determine the manner in which the petition goes. If they cannot agree on a simple matter as representation, then how many issues of national importance they could not agree on during the voter registration, the voting, tallying, verification, and the announcement of the results. So this division is in the end going to affect the commission badly, to injure its reputation, and in the event that this election is nullified, is going to put the 4 commissioners plus the other 3 commissioners, including the chairman, in a very awkward position on how to conduct the repeat election. We are seeing a situation where IEBC may resign, commissioners may resign, to pave way for more reasonable people that could agree on a sitting and conduct an election.
This is interesting because then you open our eyes to the bigger picture that there's a possibility there could be a rerun for this very election. And you start by saying that from what it is that played out at the pre-trial, we could almost tell what direction then the case is headed. Not to call it, and pretty much early for us to call this, because then we begin the hearings today and we look forward to get that final submission from the judges on the 5th of September. But when you say that just by what played out yesterday, we can almost tell what direction then this would take, what exactly do you mean in terms of its...
What I mean is this. There are only 2 possibilities that will come out of this process.
Yes.
It is either the court will allow the petition, and allowing the petition means nullifying Ruto's election and going for a rerun.
Right.
Alternatively, the court may disallow the petition, and by disallowing it, it simply means that now William Ruto becomes the president-elect and he proceeds to be sworn in.
Right.
Why I'm saying that the burden is weighing heavily on the shoulders of the respondents is in the manner in which the court has framed the issues for determination. We have 8 substantive issues for determination.
Perhaps to read them to the viewer, and I think they are captured on the papers this morning very well. Whether technology deployed by IBC met the standards of integrity, verifiability, security, and transparency to guarantee accurate and verifiable results.
You have seen on that prayer alone, you've seen commissioners differing. And the commissioners are the custodians of these technology that is used. They're the commissioners. If they are disagreeing, 4 are saying it did not meet, and 3 are saying it met. It puts the court in a very awkward position. If the internal players are doubting the process, why will the external players come out and sanctify it? If that prayer alone is allowed, then the petition is allowed.
Okay, well, interesting. Whether there was interference with the uploading and transmission of Forms 34A from the polling stations to the IEBC public portal.
This is a case by the IEBC. You've seen Commissioner Nyagaya.
Yes. Saying that his party,
saying that this thing was hacked from as early as June.
Yes.
So it is the commission casing against itself.
All right. Well, whether there was a difference between Forms 34A uploaded on IEBC portal and those received at National Tallying Center and those issued to agents at polling stations, more or less the same?
More or less the same. And if prayer 2 is allowed, then prayer 3 is automatically allowed.
Well, interesting. Whether the postponement of governors, members of parliament and MCA's elections in different areas led to voter suppression to the detriment of Raila and Karua.
You've seen what happened on Monday.
Yes.
And judges live in this country.
Right.
Azimio won 5 out of the 6 elective positions.
Right.
What does it tell you? And what was the voter difference between Raila Odinga and William Ruto? About 200,000.
Okay.
So that one is also going to be a very crucial issue in determining the matters.
Okay.
That there was a slim margin of 200. Could these 5 electoral areas have reduced? Because when you are voting for governor, when you are voting for MP, we have a motivation. People invest in all the 6 elective positions. And when you disorient them by disallowing them to vote for one candidate like the governor, you actually disorient a majority or a section of the voters who don't turn out to vote. If the court reasons that way, then that prayer will be allowed. But the court may alternatively reason that, look, you have a right to vote. You vote for the 5 and you've been promised to vote for the other one. So if you refuse to come and vote, the court's not going to cure your political ignorance. That's also the other way that the court may look at it and disallow the prayer.
All right, interesting. Whether there were unexplained discrepancies between votes cast for presidential candidates and other elective positions.
And we're going to see the repeat of the Mwilu question.
Right.
Mwilu kept asking this question in 2017. If you give someone 6 ballots, and they choose to vote for 5 candidates, 5 positions.
Account for this.
Where do they take the extra ballot? And IEBC and President Kenyatta's and Ruto's advocates, as they then were, could not answer the question. We're looking at a situation where IEBC will be in a very tough position to answer this particular question this time round.
Wow.
And this could be the prayer that will make or break the case.
Well, interesting. Whether there were, well, this one we have already touched on, whether IEBC carried out verification, tallying, and declaration of results in accordance with law.
That was the point of departure at Bomas.
Yes.
You saw 4 commissioners disagree with the chair, and they were saying that the chair was working with some foolscap, with results on in his court, hovering around and hiding. So these will bring out the rift between the Chebukati 2 and then the Chirera 3. It will be a war of the commission. And from the framing of the prayer so far, you see that the battle is between the commissioners, and the petitioners have a very easy task. They just identify the issues. Then they throw the ball back to the commission for the commissioners to fight amongst themselves. And the more they fight, the more the court, both Supreme Court and the Court of Public Opinion, gets an impression that this election was not free, was not fair, was not carried out in compliance with law.
When we talk about the law, then again the big question is as to whether then the commissioner has the sole mandate of making this declaration. As he said, he started by saying that I have a constitutional mandate to do this, and true to it, the Constitution accords him that mandate without, focusing much on these other commissioners. How do we look at the Constitution as well as the Elections Act in terms of managing this?
Now, it is important for Kenyans to understand the hierarchy of our laws.
Yes.
Because you will get laws contradicting, some giving the commission the power and some saying the chairman. At the very apex of our legal hierarchy is what we call the Constitution of Kenya. And that is the supreme law. Any other law that is contrary to this Constitution is void to the extent of the contravention.
Yes.
And number 2, we have acts of parliament, where the Elections Act come in. Number 3, we have the substance of common law and the doctrines of equity, what the courts have decided before. So on this matter, the proper reasoning of the court will be, what does the Constitution say? And the proper reading of the Constitution says, the commission shall conduct the presidential election. It doesn't say the chairperson. It is the act which says the chairperson shall declare. In saying so, the act makes the chairperson a conveyor belt. He's just first among equals. What has been agreed upon by the commission is handed over to him for declaration. The chairman does not assume the role of an overall dictator who makes decision. They must come from the commission. It is the commission to receive the results. It is the commission to verify. It is the commission to arrive at a figure that the chair will read. At the very worst, the chair ought to have said, in our plenary as a commission, we could not agree on this. And the majority opinion is this. The minority opinion is this. And a good chair will say, I was in the minority opinion, but the majority opinion will have it. Decisions of the IEBC, like any other independent commission under Chapter 15, is by the majority. It can never be by a minority. The example will be at the Supreme Court. The Chief Justice is the President.
Yes.
She may disagree with the decision of the rest of the judges, but as Chief Justice, she will have the honor and dignity of reading her minority judgment and saying, fellow Kenyans, we have a majority judgment that will be read by so and so. And the Kenyans will go by the majority judgment. IEBC cannot work in reverse.
Hence the question of quorum, right? All right, and we take a quick break. We are coming to unpack this in layman's language, perhaps what to expect in the rest of the days that the Supreme Court then will be hearing this pleas, and most importantly, as we look forward to the day of judgment that is on the 5th of September. And therefore, we take a short break and we come back with more right here.
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent, I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
How well do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la Siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business. Farming. Tasty Wednesday. Fitness Thursday. And Feel Good Friday. With amazing DJs, celebs.
Waimbaji, kuna comedians.
Maumivu yakizidi.
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent, I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
How well do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debate.
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Supreme Court ruling, and that as pertained to the hearing that officially kicks off today. And so, Wakili, we speak of the constitutional timelines as to, you know, how many days after going to the poll Kenyans should have known the results of all these quarters of leadership that we're looking at, and especially the presidential level. And therefore, Chebukati has delayed Kenyans. It has gotten to Monday, and the deadline is Tuesday. And therefore, that declaration should be made. But clearly and evidently, there's a split between him and some few of commissioners and the other commissioners. And so two different sides or two factions within the commission. So his was to come and tell the people of Kenya that, well, in my own wisdom, this is what we have established with a few other commissioners. In terms of the numbers, this is what has been tallied. This is the actual number. And therefore, if we are to go by the numbers, it is Deputy President William Ruto who's the president-elect. However, it is important to note that we have differed in as much as that was evident. Or what exactly would he have done in such a time where there are timelines? It is almost the 7th day, and therefore the time is lapsing for him to announce.
You know, the process of nomination of IEBC commissioners is a very tedious process that complies with law,
yes,
that goes for competence and meritocracy. We all believe that the commissioners are people of high moral standing in society, people who are very competent. And when you get commissioners disagreeing, there must be a problem.
Yeah.
So Chebukati ought to have used his intelligence or wisdom to resolve the stalemate that was there between him and the commission.
Has the constitution or any laws that we speak of that pertain to the election then, did they ever envision that, in the sense that, well, we have disagreed at this point, the numbers do not tally, then what do you declare?
They never envisioned that we go by practice,
Okay.
the common sense practice. The practice has always been where a decision is to be reached in a boardroom, in a commission, and people are unable to agree, you come up with those two decisions. And the decision that carries the day is the majority decision.
Okay.
Once that majority decision has been read and it is wrong, let whoever that is offended go to court.
Okay.
How a minority would force a majority to go to court is what Kenyans do not understand. And in the event that this election is nullified, Chebukati will find it very difficult to work in this country, to even conduct a repeat election, even if Supreme Court does not condemn him. Where will he stand to conduct a repeat election? Because if they nullify the election, the Supreme Court will be telling us that the 4 commissioners were right. Chebukati and the other 2 were wrong. And if they uphold the election, they will be saying Chebukati and the 2 commissioners were right. The 4 commissioners were wrong. So either way the decision goes, the commission is destroyed beyond repair. Yes.
All right. Well, this is interesting. And so a possibility of the court as well saying that we perhaps do not need to take the Kenyans through another election or to another election, and therefore make that declaration. And I think you've had this being presented, and senior counsels and legal minds argue that there's an opening to this, and therefore if it is not Deputy President William Ruto and the courts proceed to challenge the outcome or to challenge what it is that Chebukati declared, they have a window as well to proceed and say that we automatically instruct Chebukati to declare Right Honorable Raila Odinga as the president-elect.
Of course, that is not just a possibility, but is one of the options provided under law.
Okay.
That is to be found at Section 80 of the Elections Act. And the Supreme Court is part of the Elections Court under the Act. And the Elections Court has the power not just to nullify an election, but to also order for a recount, and if a winner is to be found from that recount, proceed and direct the commission to issue a certificate to the new winner. And once the Supreme Court has made that declaration that we have recounted and so has won, the commission, you have to issue a certificate, the commission has no other option. Unfortunately, this is God's court, no appeal. Whether it is by mistake or it's by competence, there shall be no appeal.
At the level of the East African court?
The East African court, the decision of a court outside Kenya is not binding to the people of Kenya. Remember, Martha Karua was awarded posts by the East African Court of Justice, but then she's unable to enforce because that court cannot compel our court with the sovereign judicial authority. We are not under the direction of East African Court or ICC on matters election. The Supreme Court shall be final.
All right, and we will be getting to that with political historian, that is Professor Macharia Munene, who joins us after this. A couple of minutes from now, he will be joining us officially, and we also get to understand the ramifications of these court processes and generally this democratic space that we are in relation to us attaining a proper East African integration and generally African integration. But to the seventh matter, whether Ruto attained 50+1 vote threshold in accordance with the law.
Remember, this was the Umtata petition. Largely, Umtata petition is premised on the fact whether Ruto attained 50% plus one vote. Even the 4 commissioners have argued that you could not tell whether Ruto attained 50% plus 1 vote.
And Chebukati argues that these commissioners were trying to force a runoff.
Yes, and what is in the pleadings of the petitioners also demonstrates that Ruto had 49.9%. It's going to be a very interesting prayer. In fact, when the first judge will be reading the judgment and declaration on these prayers, if 4 say that this prayer 7 is allowed, again the petition is allowed. It is one of the most straightforward prayers are scotched here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Whether there were irregularities and illegalities enough to affect final presidential election results.
Now, this prayer is supposed to first answer prayer 1 to prayer 7, and also audit the procedure.
Okay.
When you talk about irregularities, it relates to the procedure of conducting an election, right from the voter registration, checking of the register, on the voting day, verification, tallying, and so forth, and even the declaration. And then we have the illegalities. Illegalities means how has the process offended the election laws and the constitution. It's a very wide prayer that will be determined based on evidence that will be adduced. And the practice has always been, from the Maraga Declaration of 2017, election is a process. Election is not an event. So prayer 8 is an audit of this process we are calling an election. If the prayer is answered in the affirmative, the petition is allowed. If it is answered in the negative, the petition is lost.
And therefore, one of these matters, just one.
Just
would
one.
Warrant.
Just one. If any one prayer is allowed, we come back to prayer 8.
Wow.
And ask ourselves,
Legalities and irregularities.
did that prayer that has been allowed affect the election outcome substantively for us to annul this election? And Jubilee, as it then were in 2013, and Jubilee in 2017, advanced an argument in the US practice that you cannot annul a presidential election. It's a very big thing. In fact, judges cannot choose for us who the president is. But Maraga stopped them and said, if you do not comply with the law, even a single non-compliance, we shall annul this election. So the Supreme Court appears to have reduced the level of the magnitude of irregularities that would warrant a nullification. So today we are just speaking about if you contravene the Elections Act, if you contravene the Constitution in such a manner that will give discredit to the election process, then the petition is allowed.
Okay, and in just about a minute before we loop in Professor Macharia Munene, the reliefs and orders that Supreme Court can grant or issue, just exactly what does that statement then mean?
This statement means, one, what are the available options after answering the prayers?
Okay.
And if these prayers are answered in the negative, then the Supreme Court will dismiss the petition.
Okay.
Dismissing the petition means that IEBC declared William Ruto in accordance and in compliance with the law.
Okay.
Prayer number 2 is, if any of these prayers is answered in the positive, the Supreme Court will allow the petition. Allowing the petition means that the election of William Ruto is nullified. Number 3, the Supreme Court, as an election court, having suo motu meaning on their own volition, without being asked, they can ask for a retally of all the Form 34Bs in constituencies.
And they say that we want a retally of 15 areas. 15 areas that appear to be Ruto strongholds.
By the way, the rumor has it that these stations do not exist. So they were just pushing to see where IEBC will get there. But within the next 48 hours, we will know. They're saying these are ghost. From the Azimio lawyers, they're saying these are ghost stations. So show us. We are waiting to see where they'll get the stations from. But Supreme Court can also just do something without being prompted by the parties. By practice of law in common law, the court can now decide, give us the originals of 34. And they give the deputy registrar of the Supreme Court, tally this. And if the results come and say Raila is ahead with 50% plus 1 vote, the Supreme Court, under prayer 9, can also invoke Section 80 of the Elections Act and declare Raila Odinga president-elect. And the last prayer has always been as who bears the costs. In election petitions, parties are advised to care for their own costs to cater for their own costs,
Yes.
so as not to scare people from going to court when an election is bungled.
Which is a very expensive affair. Mwalimu Stephen Murimi says, Linda Alela, Kenyans must understand that Mr. Chebukati was performing his role as the presidential returning officer as envisaged in Article 138.10. This was not an administrative decision, as Senior Echesa is trying to paint, which requires a quorum. And we'll be looking at that in terms of how much then Chebukati will have to face it as to these petitions, because they implicate him, you know, as an individual, and therefore it's important that we look at that. But Professor Macharia Munene, political historian, is with us this morning. Professor, thank you so much for creating time, and we are glad to have you, because then we'll be looking at this from a historical perspective, the previous petitions that we have seen in the country and perhaps other countries, and what then the significance of the same would be. But even before we get to that, let's just start home, and when I say home, I mean East Africa. And reports are out here already that there's that general fear and questions from the East African community as to the sobriety of this matter, as to, you know, the question of integration, as to the stability of the country, Kenya, for it to be able to integrate with the brothers and the sisters. What does this mean, these legal battles that are ongoing, much as one would want to look at them as, you know, as quest to proper democracy? It taints and it dents our image and our stability to some extent.
No.
It does not.
It does not.
All right.
The legal process that's taking place is very good for the country. Because it shows that there is a way of settling disputes. We knew, before we even started voting, that somebody will go to court. That we knew. Whoever is the loser, we knew that they were collecting evidence long before the what? The election. Because it was so tight, so close. You could see even the opinion polls, which you don't take as gospel, but you don't ignore them.
Right.
They were showing this is a tight race, and it could go either way. So what was happening were lawyers on both sides were busy collecting what they thought would be evidence. That was going on. So given that scenario, it was expected that somebody would go to court. And that has happened. So now the court process is the one that is of interest. How it is conducted, and how the judges, after listening to the evidence, the weight of the evidence, and considering the fairness, the justice of it, and the national interest, then what do they come up with? We do not know. So whatever they decide is of interest in the whole region, not just in Kenya, in the region. Given what had happened in 2017, we had another scenario there. And what is common in the two cases is that we have foreign judges coming to listen. You know, that was very peculiar in the first place. And it looks as if the impact of the judgment here was replicated somewhere else. Malawi also later now, you know, the same thing. So they landed from Kenya. So it means that whatever happens in Kenya, other people are watching to see whether they can also do it, and in order to enhance or stabilize their country.
Perhaps so the problem would come in at that level where you say that we know that in most cases we have elections, there's always that one side that will not be satisfied, the other one that will be satisfied, and this automatically then lands us to that level of the court. To imagine that we had our presidential election nullified in 2017, then perhaps we get to another scenario of this nature, and then we get to another election where most likely again there will be that person who will be disgruntled and not satisfied with the entire process. Is that really something to pride in?
We do not expect that it will go that way, although it could go that way. What I'm saying is that the very idea that when you are dissatisfied, you go to court is a very good one.
Okay.
Instead of people running around throwing stones, although we hear that there are some places where they misbehave. But instead of that, you see, the court process is a cooling period. It lowers temperatures and makes people say, okay, let's wait. We have got 7 Kenyans, we call them judges, so and we think they are fair people. that they will look at the weight of the evidence, not trivialities. And when they look at the weight of the evidence and they see everything, then they will say, in their considered opinion, this is the way forward. And if it is accepted that way, then becomes an example to other regions that yes, you don't have to fight over these things. You can go to court. And if the judgment is seen to be fair, not just the way judges, it must be seen to be fair in the country and in the region and everywhere. Because what happens, sometimes you can make a judgment and say you are the judge, you can do whatever you want. But then it is not a judgment for you, it's for the country. And people use common sense. When people use common sense, they question your judgment. And there's nothing you can do about it. They'll talk about it and say, this was not fair because of the following, This was not fair because of this and this and this. So the judgment they come up with, in fact, it is each of the judges is on trial right now. Each of the judges. Because the argument, the reasons they give for coming to the conclusion that they come up with will itself be subject to questioning. Not to reverse their judgment, but it will be subject to questioning by legal scholars and philosophers and other people and say, look at the damage that these people did. So they have to be careful, conscious that their reputation is on the line. And it's a good thing. So if people can inculcate that culture, that when something goes wrong, go to court, and the judges make their decision, and if they blunder, you call them and say, you people blundered here and there and there and there. You know, like the Maraga judgment, which captured international imagination. It was not just a Kenyan. It captured a lot of, you say, they did what? So the people start checking. But at the same time, you also had a lot of recriminations. People complained about the judgment itself. And they had their reasons. Some people claim, well, it looks as if that the judgment, it's accepted, yes. But was it also not unprocedural? If they nullified an election on account of procedure, and then some things are said to have been done unprocedurally in the court. Then, so, you know, there are things, but it's good people talk that way, rather than to be burning tires or doing some other things.
All right, and this is happening in such a short time. And people have raised question on just how capable the courts are, or the courts, or the Supreme Court is, to make sure that they manage this to the utmost of, you know, what would be termed as right legally. This is the final stage. Just like it is the final stage, that declaration in countries like Tanzania, that upon declaration that it is John Pombe Magufuli, it is Samia Hassan Suluhu, it ends there. Is that to say that they sit in a ticking time bomb, that they have opted not to take this legal route that perhaps would cost a majority of people? And you know, some of them that are disgruntled are told you will live to fight another day.
Very well. First, let me join Prof in saying that we bear no shame by having elections nullified every now and then. The Supreme Court judges are employees of the judiciary. They are salaried employees, and part of their work every 5 years is to hear and determine a presidential petition, if any. And that is why Azimio have brought in a new dimension, in terms of prayers, that if someone is found culpable, please let that person take criminal responsibility at a personal level. Unless the court proceeds and invents a measure and a way of punishing the individual commissioners who bungle elections year in, year out, we have a possibility that in the next 100 years, we shall be having elections, going to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court shall be nullifying that election. Maraga made it clear when he was annulling Uhuru's election that IEBC, if you repeated the mistakes that we've warned you against, we shall not hesitate to nullify this election a second time. And therefore, people must just do what is right. We cannot shy away from going to court. We cannot shy away from nullifying the election just because a few people or a group of people will be dissatisfied. About Tanzania and Uganda and other jurisdictions, Kenyans must pride themselves in the fact that we are a progressive democracy. The steps we've made democratically cannot be compared to Tanzania. At least when we have a grievance, we have somewhere to go to after a presidential election. Even in Tanzania, we had discrepancies. We saw the violence that was meted against the leaders of the opposition. And they had nowhere to go. They are sitting on a time bomb. And as this younger generation grows, Tanzania may in future find it necessary to create an avenue to resolve what arises from election process. Remember, in Kenya, it took us loss of about 1,300 people in 2007 for us to reform our judicial process and to have Kenyans who are candidates get some confidence in the Supreme Court. And today, you saw, people did not fight in Homa Bay. People never fought in Kisumu because they know if the Supreme Court and Raila will convince the court that he has the evidence, the court will annul the election. If he has no evidence, the court will uphold the election and we shall move forward. But going forward, we need, perhaps as part of the law reform, to give Supreme Court more time to look into and determine this matter. 14 days is such a short period that we don't give counsel enough time to argue the matter. We don't give parties enough time to make responses. We don't give the petitioners enough time to look for the evidence. We can enlarge the period even to 30 days. Why are we hurrying in determining the matter and leaving out crucial evidence?
A thin line between justice delayed and what it is that you argue.
30 days from 14 days is
Would be fair?
It will be very fair. Remember, in 2013, the election petition in the Mutunga court was lost not because Raila did not have evidence, but because they struck out 800-page document evidence which the court argued had been filed out of time. Why will we lose justice on the altar of time?
Interesting. All right, and we come back to the significance of this, looking at what has played out historically, and elections after elections, to getting to that space where, well, there are some quarters that were disgruntled, but really nothing much could be done to this point where we can confidently march into court, challenge some of these that have been declared successfully based on what the courts then would determine as judgment. What is the significance of this when you say that it is quite an interesting and good democratic stride, and acknowledging the fact that indeed democracy is quite expensive?
Yes, democracy is very expensive, but I would rather have that expense
rather
than not have it. And see, one of the challenges, and I think Wakili has alluded to, the time allowed for appeal. But what I'm going to say is the danger of those who draft constitutions with some people in mind. And sometimes there was some sayings in that time. Isn't 14 days a little short? And there were assumptions, don't worry, everything will be okay. Yeah, there were also things like that. And of course, the other provisions of the constitutions that appear to have been put there with the people in mind, either to be denied or favored. And so when we are saying we need to relook at these things, we need to relook everything, at everything in the constitution, so that it does not appear to be leaning one way or the other in terms of application or interpretation. So the 14 days is a short time, that's true. And maybe it should be relooked, but if it is to be relooked, it's in the context of everything, and not just one small part. Because the issue of whether Chebukati had a right to say what he did, it's a constitutional issue. Because the constitution does say that he's a returning officer, isn't he?
Yes.
And he's the one to do ba. So the judges will need to say that, is that what the constitution says? Is that what it should be? Or can it be changed into a different thing. So the whole thing, the pressure on the judges is to do the right thing, bearing in mind the weight of the evidence and such thing that the people will say, yes, we don't agree, but we can see the reason.
Right.
The argument, the logic. If there is no logic to it, if there is no reasoning that people can understand, common sense reasoning, then whatever language is used will still be dismissed as language. And there may be the impression that there might have been some pre-understanding before even the hearing. Huh?
Okay.
So if there is a pre-understanding of the possible outcome before the hearing, that's dangerous. Because then people lose trust in the judicial system. And let me just, what happened in 2007, in which everything was discredited, including the judiciary. Everything was discredited. So the issue came now, how do you fix this thing in such a way that it is acceptable? So the judiciary is itself on trial now, whether it is going back to what used to be pre-2010 constitution or it is something different. And they need to avoid that impression, which has been created, that there is pressure to come up with a certain decision. And it is very unfortunate that it is happening, or it has happened. And the judges, I think, are aware of it. How do they avoid that perception? That the judgment they come up with may be because of external pressure. And that's why I'm saying their reasoning is the one that will bail them out of this thing.
Professor, allow us to take a quick break, and then we'll come back to that aspect of reasoning and logic and perhaps the people's interest as captured in the Constitution, and how then the judges would look at this matter to make a judgment that is indeed friendly for the common mwananchi. But that should be after this short break.
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent, I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
Well, do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la Siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business. Farming. Tasty Wednesday.
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent,
as the proceedings that are slated beginning this morning at 9 a.m. at the Supreme Court, but importantly also briefly look at what is happening politically in the country. Wakili, Professor speaks of, looking at logic, common sense, and looking at this one I add on top of that because I would want to assume that it would fit in well, public interest. And on several occasions in 2017, with the legal matters were presented in courts, a majority of them, and in trying to determine and get to the ruling and to the judgment, the courts really were keen on public interest. We are at a space where I think you have had this, upon that declaration that it is Deputy President William Ruto as the president-elect, even those ones that were supporters of BAMBA, left, right and center, just asking around, you could hear them say that, we are tired as Kenyans owing to the difficult times that we are in. We want to go back to business. And we all understand that the events of politics will, in a way, alter activities. And I don't know why you're laughing, but it's the reality of the matter. And therefore, there's that general feeling that, they would tell BAMBA, please accept and move on. Can we just, move from this space and get going? Well, BAMBA says that his is focused on the question of democracy and making sure that we enjoy posterity. Do you suppose the courts will put into determination and consideration the interests of the public based on the difficulties that we are in right now?
Let me tell you, Linda, that is a very misleading narrative.
Okay.
That is designed to squeeze Kenyans into some political corner or reasoning. Because people did not burn tires, because people did not fight in Kondele or in Mathare or in Kibra, it does not mean that Kenyans are at peace with what happened. It only shows the maturity of our democracy and the trust we have in the institutions. I was in Kakamega to vote for my governor, and you could see people come out strongly saying, we must do this, we must do this. And you could see the excitement after their candidates had won. So, Raila supporters or the Raila support base or the Kenyans at large from across the political divide have placed their hopes in the institution of the Supreme Court. And they will be bound by what the Supreme Court says. If the petition is disallowed, they will be pained, but they'll be pained within the legal parameters. They'll not do anything. If the petition is allowed, you will see them in a celebratory mode, just the way people are celebrating in Kapsabet and in Eldoret. And that is the kind of a democracy that we want. We do not want a democracy where if Raila loses an election, we are banning Kisumu. If Ruto loses an election or loses the petition, we are banning Eldoret. And Raila behaved strategically. He played his part, no life was lost. All eyes will be focused on William Ruto if the Supreme Court nullifies the election. Will he be able to behave in a similar manner and control his support base?
At this stage, do you suppose Kenyans are the kinds that you would tell, let's march into the streets and have, peaceful protests and demonstrations? Are they at that point where they could come to that?
We have regions that are ever ready.
Okay.
People like in Kondele, they are on standby. They get instructions from the general, they are on the road.
Okay.
And you also saw how Raila behaved. He did not address the press conference immediately after the results. And the support base was waiting for direction. And the more time he took, the better for them psychologically to cool. So we must celebrate our two leaders, William Ruto and Raila Odinga, for containing their support bases. Even out of excitement in Eldoret, in Kapsabet, no other person of contrary political opinion was injured. All we have to do is for the Supreme Court to realize that the silence, the peace we are enjoying is not because anyone has moved on, but is because Kenyans have trust in the court, especially after the Maraga decision. And they will be believed based on the evidence adduced. On the issue of reasonableness, we have this judge who said that the courts must also be guided by logic. The courts cannot arrive at a decision that is so outrageous in its defiance of logic that a proper tribunal directing its mind to the evidence adduced would have reached it. So Kenyans will be evaluating the outcome of the decision. Some decision can be so outrageous. For example, without recounting, without anything, the Supreme Court says, we declare Raila Odinga president-elect. You know, it's been so outrageous because such a decision shall not be based on any evidence adduced. Or the Supreme Court, without giving any reason, says, we are disallowing this petition. William Ruto was properly elected. So they must weigh logic against public interest. And the matter of public interest, I am a teacher of law, I teach law. We have had months and months with my students of defining public interest. You can define public interest on 100 full stops. Whose interest? What public? 50% is a one public. 48.5 of Raila Odinga is another public. So whose public interest are you addressing?
Wow.
It's a very serious question.
Interesting, interesting. And some of these matters then present us to a space where we ask, should we have some adjustments made on the Constitution? Because if this is enshrined in the Constitution and questions arise to an extent where we would march into court to seek advisory, just to get to understand some articles, some clauses and all that, and then you ask, when you talk about the public interest, when you talk about public participation, when we talk about these matters that are at the heart of the Constitution that gives the people sovereignty, what exactly do we mean?
The collective will of the people is the public interest.
Okay. And we're talking about 50%, 50 plus 1, 48%.
It's the collective will.
Yeah.
And it's not so much the percentages or the numbers.
Yeah.
But when you reflect backwards and look at, as the Wakila said, if you come up with an outrageous decision, people can see it. Okay? They don't have to be lawyers. You can say this is not common sense.
Yeah.
And if it is not common sense, it has the tendency to excite and incite some unbecoming emotions, like the ones he's talking about, Condell. You don't want that kind of thing. You don't want to give the people reasons to be unreasonable. So, and this is where we'll go back to the judges. These people, who are they? Their personality, their vision, the way they see things, and their sense of what the national interests are. So we cannot sit and you have to, this is what you should do. This is the public interest, this is the national interest. Do it this way. No. Each of them has to answer that question. Is whatever they are deciding, is it really good for the country? If they are going to make a decision that people can say this is based on trivialities, rather than the big picture. So when the evidence is very clear, overwhelming one way, nobody is arguing about it. We are not going to quarrel about that. It is the evidence. It's when there is some murkiness, and then they come up with a decision and say, what did they do? You see, in 2017, the decision was divided. It was a split court. And because it was a split court, one of the problems was that some judges did not give their reasons. 2 judges gave their reasons, but the other did not. Yeah. And so people said, no, why? And that's why these judges here are on trial. Because after they'll be asked, why didn't you give your reasons for the position that you took? What evidence did you consider? Okay? But and that's why I say common sense counts. Now, if it is shown that William Ruto did not get 50% plus 1, did not get 50%, there's no debate. He did not get it. Period.
Constitutionally?
I mean, there is no debate. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't have an argument about that. Here's the evidence. He did not. Therefore, the Constitution says, run off. Fair enough. I don't think anybody will complain about that. If for some reason some judgment is made without proper explanation, then that's a recipe for chaos. Because you have people say, wait a minute, what's going on here? And that's why you have some people say, let's look at the totality of everything. what happened in the election or did not happen. And then you say, okay, yeah, now it makes sense. So the national interest is something that cannot be ignored. As you bring in the weight of the evidence, the sense of fairness, justice, all of them. And if something is really outrageous, then you think twice. But you have to give your reasons.
All right. In the event that you're told to write about this, Professor, and yes, as you know, Wakili would say here, we're always reading what it is that you are writing, and largely picking, you know, or drawing parallels to history and all that. 2007, not so much a good scene in terms of the political scenario in the country. 2013, pretty much of an ease, but then you look at the headlines on the international scene, they're speaking about 2 individuals that have been implicated at The Hague, but then are elected to lead a country. That's a question mark. And then we come to 2017, the nullification of this very election. And then we come to a space in 2022, and again, the legal battles in court, and we do not know what would happen. In as much as we're saying that we appreciate and celebrate this, what kind of report would you write about this growth of democracy? They say amani haiji ila kwa nchi ya upanga. Is it equitable to this, that anytime you seek to get democracy, it should always be on perhaps negative records?
I don't think it's be negative, because as we develop,
I'm really trying to
as we develop this tradition, it's a tradition. We are developing a tradition, a democratic tradition, that people will go and vote thinking they win, and some people who have done some strange things, and that's why then we go to court to decide, to tell us, did they do the strange things they are accused of, or was it proper? You see, in this election, up to the last day, the general mood was that it is very good. The general mood, it was very good until the last day. And then something happened on the last day. And so we then have this kind of thing. And that's something to be analyzed afterwards. What is it that happened? Now, in 2007, actually, there was no provision very much for going to court. And a lot of things happened before the election, during the election, and after the election, that just went haywire. And as a result of whatever happened in 2007, about 6 people were sent to The Hague to answer a few questions. And 2 of them ended up becoming presidential and deputy presidential candidates. And the question that was raised, should they be allowed or not? And the answer was very simple. Yes, they should. For the simple reason that the Constitution says you cannot be stopped until you are convicted and your appeals have been rejected all the way to the Supreme Court. Yes. So these people had been accused of some very dangerous offenses. But see, eventually they were let go. It is true, as far as I know, that a lot of Kenyans turned up to save them from permanent accommodation at The Hague. You know, the vote was really anti-European, anti-Western, because they had come up with very awkward statements, as if to order Kenyans how to vote or not vote. I remember there was this High Commissioner from Britain, Christian Turner.
Right.
And he went, within a month of his reporting in Nairobi, he started making very bad statements. That if you go do this way, you have only essential contacts only with us. Say, wait a minute, who are you? Then poor Johnny Carson in Washington, used to be ambassador here, said, choices have consequences. You'll see if you... So the reaction, the public reaction was, something is wrong here. Where are these Western powers trying to force us on this or that direction? So the vote for Uhuru and Ruto at that time was essentially a protest vote against the West. And so that, you know, so the issue of whether someone can be stopped or not is there, enshrined. You cannot until somebody is what? Which brings me to a different point. The contradictions within the Constitution itself.
Right.
This 2010 Constitution we passed. A very good Constitution, but full of contradictions. The Bill of Rights, under which that argument is entrenched, you cannot stop somebody unless he's been convicted. That's part of the Bill of Rights. Because it is possible for somebody to frame you. They don't like you.
Yeah.
So, wakuwekelea kitu. That's an allegation. And then if that becomes the basis of stopping you, then your rights have been infringed. At the same time, we have this, the Integrity Chapter, which says some people, if they are accused, if you think they are doing something, then they should not be allowed.
Yeah.
How do you balance these two? That yes, there are some people who may not have been convicted, but you know, Right. You know. Yep. So how do you balance the two? And that's why now the judiciaries have been having problems. Sometimes they say, so-and-so should not be allowed, but some other time they say, no. Maybe we need to relook at this
Constitution
and then harmonize places where there are contradictions.
Well, acknowledging the dynamism of it, the dynamic nature of the Constitution, perhaps we could get to such spaces that also are very murky. Kakamega County, you said you traveled all the way to go and vote for your preferred candidates, and Mombasa. And I know we've touched on this, but just to expound it further, and in relation to this case and the fact that there was a petitioner that argued that out of this postponement, then in a way this could have altered the presidential vote. And so the fact that the Blues really had a win in terms of this, does it speak something? Does it speak some essence of life? Does it present more evidence? Does it appear as a matter that the courts would want to consider to establish on some 2-3 things that petitioner presents?
Remember, courts are courts of law, are not courts of opinion.
Okay.
And the outcome of the Blues may do is to influence on very peripheral grounds the thinking of the judges. Okay. But the judges cannot cite that in their judgment
whatsoever,
because it will lack legal basis. But because judges are human beings, and scholars of jurisprudence have argued that judges are emotive and some of their decisions are out of emotion, you may get that voting pattern influencing them. Okay. The truth is, people like me perhaps traveled to Kakamega because the person contesting was my uncle, was my cousin, was my brother. And without him on the ballot, I will not have the immediate reason to go and vote. And if I was going on the voting day, arriving there and voting for Fernandez Barasa, for example, would have given me a chance to also vote for either William Ruto or Raila Odinga. Right. That is the only reasoning that may influence the judge, but may not be a ground. Because when Kenyans are called upon to vote, it's a democratic process. You have a right to go and vote. If you are told, vote for 5 candidates, you will vote for the 6th candidate in 2 weeks' time. Under the law, there is no problem. Right. But what will be up for determination, in my opinion, is whether the grounds for postponement are justified in law. If they're not justified in law, then that malice alone will inform to voter suppression in the strongholds of Raila Odinga. So the court will not focus on how the Blues have performed in the by-elections. The court will focus on whether we had sufficient grounds to warrant the postponement of the elections in the 6 electoral areas. Okay.
All right, amazing. And I know there's so much that is likely to happen as to the courts, and we'll be crossing over there in about 30 minutes or there. Wakili, I know I have to release you, but not before you tell us something about the Maui Factor, because when we talk history, we do not fail to talk Kanu, we do not fail to talk the dynasties, and now the hustlers that are coming on board. And I'm sure in reference to this, the future will be focusing much on all this conversation as to the gains and the movements and, the matrix of politics in the country. Therefore, they say that it is the fallen Moi political name. Do you agree to that?
I don't agree to that. In politics and with dynasties, they take break.
Okay.
The Maui family is on a technical break. Gideon took that break, I think, between 2007 and 2013 when he came back as senator. In Kenyan politics, remember, is largely influenced on tribal basis, on terms of resources. Who has the more resources? Today, the tide in the rift may not be favoring the Mois because another son of the Kalenjin, William Ruto, had the probable chances of forming government.
Okay.
So he had the necessary support on the ground. But when William Ruto's tide goes off, then the Mois can get a chance to resurrect. Because what Moi took, or what Moi has, can sustain politics for the next 20 or 30 years uninterrupted. In any event, even the UDA government, if Ruto forms government, it is still KANU in different jersey.
Okay.
Ruto was KANU's, I think, Secretary General at one time. Rigathi Gachagua was a DIO, and being a DIO those days, one of the qualifications was to be a life member of KANU. So KANU is still in power, and Moi's prophecy still lives with us, that KANU will rule for 100 years.
All right, and so this is a clear indication that KANU is just metamorphosizing to better grounds. Your parting shots as you proceed to the next assignment.
I want to ask Kenyans to be patient, to follow keenly the proceedings at the Supreme Court, and I want to believe that the judges will use the law to assess the evidence and make a just decision that will unite rather than divide this country. Kenya belongs to all of us. Let us accept the outcome of the court.
All right, lots of feedback in relation to the talk that we have had in response to, again, us looking at the possibilities of the Supreme Court battle that is ongoing. Any moment from now, we'll be crossing over to the courts. But before then, let's take a quick short break. I'll definitely love to hear what then Professor would be saying about the KANU factor and the Maui factor, and especially when it comes to the question of politics. That should be after this break. Wakili, thank you so much. All right.
Despite being visually impaired, he is a jack of all trades. It is our quest to find answers on how to take care of children with special needs and those with disability. You do not need to see musical notes to understand music, but rather to have your soul feel the vibe.
Actually, for us to make a wheelchair, we have to take measurements of the user.
After doing my assessment, I get to know the parent. I get to know the heaviness she's carrying.
Disability comes at different stages of life.
How well do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la Siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business, farming. Tasty Wednesday, Fitness Thursday, and Feel Good Friday with amazing DJs, celebs,
waimbaji, kuna comedians, alafu kuna wajinga.
and music bands every Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m.
The next set of millionaires are farmers. As we know, agriculture has been and still is the backbone of our economy. As we traverse the different counties to meet different farmers, we ensure to get the story of how they started farming and even how they continue to penetrate the market and overcome the challenges.
Hapa, the reason why nilieka goose na si ducks. Goose, they are very easy to maintain.
A lot of farmers keep on calling, inquiring whether you're supposed to raise some seeds.
Declined tremendously.
Right.
And this election has really put it down as a party, because I think it won 1 seat or maybe 2, and it does not have the vibrance that was there. At the time of its formation in 1960, it was the liberation movement, the party, and its opposition that was created soon after did not make headways. KADU was comparatively weak, strong but weak.
Right.
And that's why it lost elections twice before independence.
Yes.
And then, that's how KANU then got in. And it survived from 1963 until today, but in incremental decrease.
Unfortunately.
And this is clearly. So what has happened is that other parties might come up and take its place. It should be given credit for lasting that long.
Right.
And so you had the wave from the 1992 election, the multi-party election, the return of multi-partyism. You could see the erosion,
right,
of if the voters at the time, more than half voted against the KANU regime. It still was there holding, but you could see it was on the way out. Not the same thing. KANU had a machinery across the country. That's the advantage that it had. That there was a KANU office almost everywhere. And so when it sends out messages, in theory, they were received everywhere.
Yeah.
But it came to a point where those messages stopped being believable. And therefore people say, oh yeah, okay, KANU, but they don't want anything to do with it. Now, can it be revived? Difficult. It's still going to be there as a historical fact. The revival, unless there comes a very strong person, because sometimes parties tend to go with the personality.
Personalities, all right.
So if a very strong person was to come and he captures the national mood and he uses KANU as his party, then there might be a revival.
Revival of the same. Do you suppose the coming back of multi-partyism then would have been the greatest undoing for KANU? And now that we actually are getting to that space of coalitions?
The greatest undoing of KANU was its own mistakes.
Okay.
Because then you have all the people in most who joined other parties. They were KANU people. The biggest mistake that Moi did, or made, was the Mlolongo fiasco.
Okay.
That undid him completely. Because people could see, you see, in secret ballots, you don't know how somebody voted.
That's true.
You can say, well, I voted for you, which may be not true. But no, we
and in most cases, it's the case.
Yeah, you know. But in the Mlolongo, you can see which line is small. And then the returning officer stands up and tells you, a line with 5 people has won over a line with 100 people. And you say, no, it cannot go that way. And the blunders were so big that I think there was one instance when a woman said, I was not a candidate. How did I win? So it undid the Moi regime. And it undid KANU at that time. So the rest of it is kind of a slow down, downward slide, and which culminated with the pressure, the multi-party allowance, and the election of 1992. So it had been on a downward trajectory from 1988. And it's only now that maybe a slow death it's coming. And credit to President Moi, some of the political things we are doing, we are involved in. He's the one who put in the 2-term limit when KANU was controlling.
Yes.
And the 5 provinces provision. He's the one who did it for his own reasons. And of course,
we turn out in favor of
them. But yeah, but in the long run, I think they were very good.
Yeah.
In the long run, the reason he did it was different, but so we give him credit for that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, he did not want anybody else to rule for as long as he had.
Okay.
And so it's a 2-term limit. and to show that you have a national reach to stop some people who may be very popular and get 50%, but they have no anywhere else. That was the design, but it was a very good thing in the long run. Besides that, until or unless somebody comes and captures public imagination, let's say the way Raila does, in some sections of the country. If Raila goes in a certain place, a lot of people will follow him there.
Right.
Okay? So if for some reason Raila was to take over Kanu,
yes,
then there will be some sort of revival in Kanu.
Right.
If maybe some other, if Ruto was to take Kanu, there will be some sort of revival because he has this following. And then might be able to build it up. So until somebody else comes up who has that magnetism, political magnetism, Kanu is on the way out.
Kanu is on the way out. And they tried to revive it. They called it Kanu Fresh. But here we are. Why is it that Kanu then has been reduced to a Maui Factor? And now that we have seen the fall, or the current fall of Gideon Moi, as well as the fall of Raymond Moi, something that has hugely been projected, and especially at a point when we're talking about this bit of, I don't know whether we'll call it class wars, they would want to say, the dynasties versus the hustlers.
See,
and the chief hustler hails from the same region where some of the chief dynasties then would hail from.
Well, he was created by those people.
And, a creation of Moi, they
yes,
say.
he is. He is that. But he has a different approach, personality. The man is very clever, very strategic in the way he does things. There is this talk that he used to be part of the YK92, which he was, but a junior fellow. Sometimes he jokes, he used to be Jirongo's.
Yes.
See where Jirongo is and where he is.
Now, life.
One time he was telling kujipanga tu. So he started kujipanga at that time. Remember in the election of 1992, the YK92, the first thing that President Moi did once he was declared the winner was to destroy YK92.
Okay.
Why did he do that? Because he thought that they were having some funny ideas about replacing him.
Okay.
So he destroyed it immediately. Now, this man reorganized himself, and then he went and destroyed Moi's friend, Ruben Chesira in Eldoret. That shows that, prove that he can do things on his own.
Yes.
He does not need Moi or the other big power to get things done. So he proved that. And that people should have paid attention to this. So he got into parliament, and Moi decided to bring him nearer rather than outside there, where he was being a nuisance.
Yes.
So he was made a minister, and they became a very strong Kanu player. So he's one of the people who received Uhuru in parliament and kind of helped to show him the. And when Uhuru was losing the election, he was the one person who stood there with Uhuru.
Right.
He used to say that it's time for the .coms, meaning the Kibaki and Nyachai should get out of the way so that the younger ones can see. So he is that strategic. And he was then able to capture the imagination of the Kalenjin nation. And in doing so, to replace Moi. So having replaced Moi, Moi now became a bad name. Not just in Kenya, but even in that area. So he took over the control of that thing. So for the Mois to come up, they already had a tarnished image. And unfortunately for the Moi family at present, there's no one who captures. And there's no Raila in them. Let's put it that way. Raila, sometimes you say not have got along very well with his father, but he stood out on his own. There is something about. That does not mean that in the next generation or not, there may not be somebody.
So there's going to be a comeback, perhaps.
There can be.
All right.
There can be. You cannot rule that out.
Okay.
But it will have to be somebody who really will need to capture the imagination of the people. Uhuru's rise, apart from being shepherded by Moi, he came of age in 2007. And that's when people said, yeah, I think he's okay.
Right. We can now look at
You can look at him.
Consider him.
Not because he was a Kenyatta, although he did not hurt, but because the crisis of the time required somebody to be seen to respond to the crisis. He was seen to respond. And so people said, okay, that's the one.
Yeah.
Now, so crises tend to produce their own people. Will there be such a crisis in which, in future, somebody in the Maui family might come out and be seen to be the one to deliver? If that happens, and then he decides to continue being in KANU or come with a different party, see, Uhuru used to be chairman of KANU.
Right.
And he ditched it. Come up with something else.
Yeah.
But there can be somebody from the Maui family, not now. Those elders are out. Raymond is out.
Yeah.
Gideon is out. And whoever else. But maybe their children.
And this is not unique to the Moi family. I am looking at the Kibaki family.
Yes.
I am looking at the Raila family.
Yes.
I am looking at President Uhuru Kenyatta's family.
Yeah.
They would definitely wish to have some people, but they have
But they
not
are
come
not
out to polish and to...
They're not there.
Not just yet.
They are not there.
Okay.
At present.
Would we confidently say that if at all there is this dynasty talk that is real on the ground, then perhaps it's the end of the dynasty?
Well, you can never, it helps to have a little money.
Well, in a big way, and they say our politics is hugely about the money.
But money is not everything.
Yeah.
It is the personality, the charisma of the person. To try and ride on the dynasty is a mistake. Because people would then turn away and say, wait a minute, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
But when the money, the wealth, the prestige matches activities and the desires of the people at a particular time, then they go very well. But when there is a dissonance, and then people say, well, this person, who does he think he is? Huh? And then they tell you, stay with your wealth and everything, you are going our different ways.
Right.
You don't want that to come to that level. So there is a possibility. And it's not just those families. There are many families, including the Mudavadis,
right.
and the Bengalas.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, they are there. But what has happened, I think, is that within the family structure, there are no people who emerge to be seen, yes, that's the one. Because leaders, they may be nurtured, but they don't become natural. Sometimes you can tell somebody who is maybe pushed into a position, maybe because of connections.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the performance, and when crises come, then they are shown to be weak.
Right.
And not capable of doing anything. And then they are, but that's why I say crises are very important, because somebody comes up. And that person might come from those families, which is good, like the way Uhuru did. Or they might come from some other place. And people say, yes, we can trust that person, put our hope over there, but not there.
Right.
It can happen. Now, the thing is that those people then might develop their own traditions, some dynasty inclinations.
Yes.
As a concern, not a concern, but an issue, if Raila is, if Ruto becomes president, and given his ability to strategize, and he might want a second term, which there's nothing wrong with that. Would he then start grooming some of the
juniors?
The junior, and he seems to be showing some tendencies towards that already. I think it's either one of the boys, Nick or whatever, say, go and try that.
Right.
So that might happen. And the question that will come is that the right step?
Okay.
Will those children be acceptable to the public simply because they are Ruto?
Right.
Or is it because they perform?
Big question. And reminds me of, Kimani Kihika, who passed on sometime in 2004.
Yes.
And it took a while before we saw another Kihika, but today we see a Susan Kihika, a female for that matter.
A daughter.
Yes, a daughter for that matter. And most of the times when we talk politics and we talk about these dynasties, it's on rare occasions that you'll see the faces of the ladies coming out to the fore. And true to it, even within the Kenyatta family, we have powerful ladies that are just within government as it stands today. Why is it that we tend to overlook these ones that are more of ladies, and we focus much on the male character? And most importantly, do these comebacks then, when we're talking about a possibility of a comeback, say for the Mois, will it take longer than perhaps they would have expected themselves?
It depends on who is that second, third generation.
Okay.
And how they have been acculturalized. The issue of Susan, very interesting lady. She's good looking, and so she has this magnetism.
Yeah.
And she has a name, Kihika.
Right.
Kihika, the man himself, was something. And interesting. One time he wanted all his wives to be MPs.
Yes. And 41 children is no joke.
Yeah. So among those men, one of them is likely to imitate the father.
Yeah.
And he looks at he's the girl who has done it and done it very well.
Right.
Susan is a very shrewd politician. Very shrewd. And she's powerful. She has proven that it can be done.
Right.
And if you look at Nakuru, the women are ruling.
They're calling it Nakuru girls.
Yes, the Nakuru girls. And that may be replicated in other places. Could say, well, it happened in Nakuru. Yeah, we can also do it.
Right.
In Kwale, see, they elected the
lady.
Yeah, who happened to have been the deputy governor to the outgoing governor, Mvurya. So at least she had that push, but there was more than that. People like her. So they voted for her, not because she's a woman, and not because she's in this party or that, but because they like her. She has shown quality. So the more women come out and show the quality, the metal, they'll be elected. Because people are saying, no, we want somebody who can stand up when the issue come up. And it's growing. Yeah? So the ones that are appointed to positions, sometimes appointed, not necessarily because there is those don't count very much.
Yeah.
But those who come up on their own, and you can see the metal in them, the number is going to increase. And as it increases, more and more of them will be voted for. Of course, it might go in hand with the fact that the males are in danger of destroying themselves. One of the main concerns right now about the boy child, who is totally messed up.
Right.
In some places, they are just idle, drunk, or misplaced.
Right.
Even in classrooms, when we can see the girls are doing better in class than the boys. And it's not a one-off, it's a trend. So that is likely to be the case everywhere, even in political leadership and all sorts of things. And we can see it.
Right.
So it's happening. And it's not a favor to the girls. It's because they do it, they deserve it. So even the issue of the president is not an issue, it's not a big thing. One of the good things that Charity Ngilu did.
Ngilu did, okay.
In 1997, when she jumped the gun, because there was a lot of talk about female candidates. And the big girls were discussing who among them. So then she jumped the gun and said, I'm here, I'm the candidate. And she was very exciting. She came number 5 in that election.
Masaya Ngilu.
Yeah, and Masaya Ngilu, Masaya Mama.
Yeah.
that it broke. So now it's no longer a novelty to hear that there is a woman running to be what? To be president. It's not. It's not a novelty to hear that there is a woman running to be governor. And they win. Like this lady who defeated Kiraitu in Meru.
In Meru, yes.
Yeah, and Kiraitu was supposed to be a powerhouse. And she comes.
And Meru and Embu pretty much close to each other are ladies there.
Yeah,
Lady governors,
you can see, and there's Cecilia Maria. So the ground has shifted, and the old days about paternal attitudes are dying on their own.
That's true.
And partly because the men have misbehaved, and also because the women are working very hard, and they are proving themselves. So the democratic space that we are talking is opening up for everyone.
Opening up. Will that then mean it's a natural death for talk about affirmative action, or then again a scenario where we'll have affirmative action in favor of men?
Well, it might take a long time before we have to deal with that, but it's something to consider.
Right.
Affirmative action has its place in some areas, not everything. It has some place. But that, the way things are going, you may not need it.
Right.
And if they are going that way, then that's very positive. You don't need it.
That's a plus.
It's a good plus.
Yeah.
But there still remain some areas where it has to be there. Where there is discrimination on account of gender,
right? Not
on account of ability, on account of gender. Then you check. What is this? And it has to be eliminated. But there are some areas you maybe say let nature take its course.
Yeah.
It is working, and so when you're talking about Ngilu being the candidate,
right?
Since then we have had a few other women saying they want.
They're capable.
They may not have gone very far as the Ngilu did, but they have, and they can do it. So affirmative action is there, and it's needed in some areas.
Yeah.
But encourage people to come out.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right. You speak of Musalia Mudavadi, and I'm glad you mentioned him, because in this very space of politics today, if it is a Kenya Kwanza government, then he's at the heart of it.
Yes.
And also, if it's a Kenya Kwanza government, based on what the courts will judge, the second lady argues that she will focus much on making sure that she looks into the matters of the boy child, because she realizes that there's this problem that is cropping up, in terms of us overlooking the position of the boy child. But Musalia Mudavadi brought to the fore in the space of politics a very long time ago, perhaps earlier than the likes of President Uhuru Kenyatta. But it just appears like it's not really getting to the ultimate desire of what would have been Moses Mudamba's wish. Just what is happening here, and what does it speak about the Mulembe nation that looks up to him as the purported kingpin?
It was Atwoli who made him this.
Okay. It appears like Atwoli is the very same person again who wishes to
remember
see him go down.
That ceremony in
his home,
saying
Kakamega.
The speaker of the Mulembe is Musalia.
Yes.
And says he had paid for scholars to come up with the... So he did that. Musalia has a good personality, but there's no magnetism, political magnetism.
Yes, and charisma and all that, all right.
He has no fire, except recently when he was talking about earthquake. Beyond that, there's something which is...
But how much fire did Kibaki have?
Kibaki was a very strategic operator.
Okay. Uhuru himself did not appear as though he had the fire.
No, after 2007 he showed it.
He showed it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not before.
All right.
Yeah, but Kibaki was very clear that he was always number two to somebody. What that did is to make him number one to everybody.
To everybody.
Because when the number ones cancel each other, what happens?
They focus on the next.
Yeah, the number two.
Yes.
And this started way back in 1990s when he bolted from KANU and helped to form DP, which he later dumped. But you talk to people from there, they say, oh, our candidate is this one, in Ford Kenya, or in Ford Asili, or in KANU, or in whatever. Not Kibaki. But in case your candidate does not make it,
who next?
Kibaki. So that played very well for him. because when these others cancelled each other, he was the most reliable person.
Who appeared not to focus much on outshining the bosses.
No, he's not interested in that.
Yes.
See, at least he was intelligent. People said he was very intelligent. At least he could debate very well, if nothing else. Among the middle class and the elite, he was very attractive. But he was not the person to arouse a lot of emotions like Matiba.
That's true.
And so when it's not Matiba, who? Kibaki.
Right.
When it is not Masinde Muliro, who? Kibaki. When it's not Moi, who?
Kibaki again.
So he was always number. When it is not Jaramogi, who?
Yeah.
Kibaki. So he was always the second choice for everybody, which meant that he became the first choice for everybody. And that's how he ended up leading in 2002. By then, by August of 2002, it was clear that the coalition that Kibaki had created, the NAK, him, Ngilu, and Wamalwa, they were winning.
Yeah.
At the time, KANU was disorganized, was messed up, and they were still jostling for positions.
Yeah.
Before Moi told them to get lost, when he said he prefers Uhuru. So all these people who were thinking, because the 2 terms were coming to an end, and Moi had to get out, according to his own rules. So when he gets out, then who takes over KANU?
Right.
That was the issue. So you had people like Kalonzo, you had Saitoti, you had Raila, you had Ngala, you had Musalia, and you had Uhuru.
Yes.
The whole were, and Nyachai.
Simeon.
They were there waiting. They said, Moi is going.
Oh, Simeon was disgruntled, yes.
Yes. And Simeon was paying a lot of money to people to disagree with Moi on when there appeared to be effort to review or repeal the 2-term limit. There was that effort. So that Moi can continue being president because he knows how to. And then somebody else can become maybe prime minister.
Right.
That was being talked about. When that failed, the question is who takes over KANU? And all these people are there waiting. So because they were disorganized, the Kibaki side looked very good. NAK. So that's why he was winning.
Right.
Already. So it was a matter of time. And as things turned out, people were disappointed in KANU, and they ran away to Kibaki's side,
right.
The winning side.
Kibaki Tosha.
Yeah. And then they took credit for it.
Well, amazing. It's a bit of history there that is very, very important, that equally is likely to play out in future. They say in most cases you will see some of these things play out, and therefore when you see them, just know they are not new. It's just that it gives us more knowledge on how to manage and to handle some of the same. Professor, I must say thank you so much. In about 2-3 minutes, we'll be crossing over to the Supreme Court. It's all systems go. Chief Justice Martha Koome having conducted that pre-trial yesterday, and of course on this presidential petition giving out a set of guidelines that will manage this process all the way to the 5th of September, where we will have that final judgment, and therefore we're looking forward to that. Your expectations for the day as we close?
Well, my expectation is that the judges will do the right thing, whatever that is.
That's true.
And that they will be reasonable and they will make sense.
And I think it is the expectation.
Yeah. And for the public, don't worry, the country is okay.
That's true.
It's safe. Just accept the decision as it goes and we move on.
Above all, we want a safe country.
We want a safe country, nothing else.
Thank you so much, Professor Macharia Munene, political historian and also an expert on matters international relations. It was good having you this morning, and looking forward to more sessions of this where we grasp some bit of history, rich history that perhaps could be had from such great minds that have